And we are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, nonsense free, silly last minute end of the election promises free. Media, broadcasting live here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Yes, the fur, the nonsense, the balderdash is flying with just a few short weeks to go to the midterm elections nationally, and the all-important gubernatorial race here, and the really more important race for General Assembly taking place. Again, the nonsense, the silliness, the foolishness, the flying. Just heard, Alan Fung is actually promising more tacos on Taco Tuesday. You heard it here first. And you'll have your choice of spicy, mild, and super spicy salsa. All right? So that's in from the Fung campaign. More choices on Taco Tuesday. The Trillo campaign. They've announced less homework and they are ending final exams. And the governor's campaign, she still has nothing to say. She's running on a record, which in any other part of the free world would have disqualified her months ago. LBJ had a better record as president in the 1960s, and he decided not to run again. So irony is a trait that has yet to be realized by any of our major campaigns. Each of the campaigns is recruiting its A team, B team, C team, D team. No one's calling me yet. Oh well. Ignored again. But then again, no one comes by to my house with literature either. You think I'm on a list? Whatever. So the nonsense continues. Whose fault is this? Actually, principally, it's our fault. We accept this. Except here at the Coalition, we don't. And if you take the time to dial in and watch us occasionally, then you clearly don't either. When we say outrage porn free, we actually mean it. Outrage porn is loosely defined as nonsense issues that stir up emotions, that can cloud, obscure, and obfuscate any real conversation about issues whatsoever. Employed very often by campaigns who, officers and governors and whatever's are actually in place, because they really don't want a campaign. They would rather draw this out with nonsense, nonsensical issues, and keep their eyes off the ball. Every couple of days, we've got a new shiny object. Next in line for fault, of course, is obviously the principal legacy media. If you look at the television stations here in town, they enable it, while simultaneously holding public occurrences with the Providence Journal saying how much they hate it. Yet they do it again. Simultaneously stifling any real conversation at these public occurrences. Who also is at fault? Well, obviously the candidates themselves, particularly the incumbents, and any one of them that falls for it. I would challenge any of you to explain to me the difference between the tax policy and the tax theory of any of the major candidates. I would challenge you to have a conversation about how they feel about the death penalty, how they feel about sentencing guidelines, the war on drugs, property taxes, education funding. Do we know any of that about any of them? Not so much. Why? Because they don't want us to. This has turned into nothing less than a WWE match. And by saying that, I don't want to insult WWE fans or their protagonists, because it's a WWE wrestling match without any of the thought. Each one of them has become a caricature of themselves. Personally, I like Joe Trillo. Personally, I don't like Gina Raimondo. I wish they would all focus at least some of the time on the issues, and I wish the media would actually ask some challenging questions. Instead, they spend most of their time handicapping the election. What is the impact of Joe Trillo going as an independent? I don't know. He's decided to run for office. His choice, his money, his time. Here at the Coalition, we refer to people who run for office as heroes, as patriots, because they are, except for Gina Raimondo. who batted who over the head? I mean, one of the funniest memes I saw this week was by my friend Alicia. What was it? Caulking guns matter. Amazing. Gambling revenues are down. Crime is up. The state just lost a major anchor in in the mall in Providence, with whom the state has got a significant vested interest. The state continues to hemorrhage cash at the convention center. I don't know when the last time we had a non-PCRP Bruins event. I guess Mumford & Sons is coming into town in March. Can't do anything between now and March? I guess not. Nope, we continue to hemorrhage cash. We continue to live in fear of that next, and it's just a natural turn of events, that next market collapse, or they call it a correction. At which point in time, the much vaunted pension systems that Gina saves will all go crumbling into the Woonsocket. But nope, we're going to continue to talk about crap. Now here's the issue. As a libertarian, you would assume, well, that's their television stations. They're entitled to do as they think, as they want, as they please. Not so much. It's the public airwaves. And I think it's time we need to take back the public airwaves, do away with the FCC, and introduce the free market into the public airwaves. The notion that somehow, because of a poem and a promise and a whisper, 80, 100 plus years ago, that these organizations still have this highly lucrative stranglehold on information is ludicrous. We need to introduce competition into the public airwaves. And again, if that means getting rid of the FCC, let's do it. There isn't a single public agency outside of our fundamental defense here in this nation, quite frankly, that we can't get rid of. And we need to start getting rid of it soon. Which leads me into the shameless plug of the week. The Road to Liberty Forum, the very first one, sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island, will take place a week from Saturday at the Holiday Inn, I guess we don't call it the Holiday anymore, the Crown Plaza in Warwick. Tickets continue to be on sale at lpri.us/forum, or just go to lpri.us and you'll see the link there. International economist Jeffrey Tucker will be speaking. Fascinating individual. Listening to him is life-changing. A completely different perspective on, well, everything. One of the earliest progenitors of cryptocurrency. He's an anarchist, an economist, a free thinker, and essentially will lay waste to every concept, every part of your belief system that revolves around exactly how government should be involved in your life. Scott Horton will be joining us as well. Veteran affairs rights activist, man of peace. He'll be talking about American police actions. We'll also have several local speakers who will be joining us, including Eric Palmieri. He's been on our show. He is the policy director of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. He'll be talking about the Quaker movement and free markets. So, an evening well spent, great conversation, dinner with a couple of America's most fascinating, most significant free thinkers here in Little Rhodey. Who'd have thunk? Deep in the petri dish of failed socialism, that we'd have individuals like this. Well, you do. And it's hopefully the first of an annual event that will take place as the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island and your host do our damnedest to introduce a different perspective into Rhode Island government. On Friday night, your host has been invited to take place again in the Lively Experiment. So in one of those weird, only in Rhode Island moments, there'll be an hour or so where I'll be on the Coalition Talk Radio and also simultaneously be appearing on your public radio station. Public television station. A Lively Experiment hosted by Jim Hummel with a revolving cast of characters from all parts of public life of Rhode Island, brought together with conflicting opinions and unique perspectives. It is appointment watching, regardless of who the guests are. Because the special sauce, the secret sauce in this moment, is not just the guests and their interaction, but it's what the host accomplishes. Jim Hummel has done a remarkable job of bringing together a variety of perspectives and allowing them to challenge each other in a thoughtful, yet, I wouldn't say combative, but a more aggressive environment than that was the hallmark of the show and prior hosts and prior generations. The point is, we're given an opportunity to debate each other. You have to be on your A game on this show. You can't just talk over people. You have to have a point. And your point has to be supported by facts. If not only do you have the other cast members, the other roundtable members, if you will, but you've also got Jim to contend with. And we don't know the subjects on that show until literally a day or so before. Ripped from the headlines. Consider this sort of a political version of Special Victims Unit. Because something of that happened that morning, and guess what? We're going to be on the hot seat that night to discuss it. So yes, and by the way, for the record, I am so grateful for Jim for the opportunity to participate in that roundtable. It is one of the great discussions, and it's been going on for decades here in Little Rhodey. Now tonight's show, we've got a number of guests going to be dialing in. It's going to be kind of a loose format. Lauren Nidell, she is running for the General Assembly. She'll be joining us in a few minutes when she gets here. She's at an endorsement meeting right now. So at a certain point, she'll get here. Nick Williams, he of Bus Strike and Teamsters fame, is going to be joining us. And we're going to engage in something that I like to do on the coalition, which is what some would call in the medical field a post-mortem. The late, great Vincent A. Buddy Cianci had a wonderful way of talking about how media handles issues in Rhode Island. He called them vapor issues. For a few short days, they were the center of our universe. And certainly, if you lived in Providence and your children go to school in Providence, the bus strike certainly, well, it was. But what happens afterwards? When the dust clears? What kind of conversation do we have then? Where is the post-game wrap-up, the analysis of what happened? We're a week or so removed from the successful conclusion of the negotiations. What really happened? What impact will it have on Rhode Islanders and Providence going forward? Particularly in an election season, these are the things that get to be forgotten. Because quite frankly, they require institutional knowledge, an actual intellectual curiosity, and not an obsession with clickbait. I guess that disqualifies the Providence Journal then. Oh, my God. So Nick Williams is going to be in. Hopefully, right after that, Jonathan Keith. He's running for your Rhode Island State Senate out of Cranston. He'll be dialing in to the show. And we're going to have a conversation about his campaign and some of the issues that are raised. Emphasis on issues. Because that's what we're interested in here. Remember always, and we will repeat them every time, the rules of the coalition. We're not interested in your fundraising. We're not interested in your polling. We're interested not if you're going to win. We would like to know why you should win. And that's based on your interpretation of the issues, your leadership, and your vision for Rhode Island going forward. That V word is something that's been missing from the Rhode Island lexicon for some time. Have you heard anyone have a conversation about vision in this election? Is there anyone in the current spate of candidates, as they say, who inspires you even to contemplate the word vision? I'll leave that up for your own interpretation. Certainly Gina is convinced that she has got quite a vision. Well, I have seen that vision, and quite frankly, it scares the hell out of me. Not only is that true of Governor Raimondo, but the cast of characters running for the General Assembly. Lost in the media's lazy obsession with the important, but not exclusively important, Frias-Mattiello race is a spate of races statewide that really pit completely, and I'll use the word diametrically opposed visions. Lauren Nidell is an example of that. She's offered, by the way, on the record here at the coalition to debate her opponent, Mr. Chippendale. Mr. Chippendale did not return queries. I'm still willing to make that happen in the run-up to the election. We'd love to see that. I've had the opportunity to meet Mike once or twice now, and I'd love to see him and Lauren engage on the issues. So it would appear that debates right now are few and far between. Studiously avoided by incumbents, eagerly anticipated by rising and young opponents, and almost always never happening. And that's a shame, and I don't understand why. I'm the chairman of a small political party in the state, the Libertarian Party. We are a party on the rise. I will be happy, for the record, to debate anyone, anywhere, anytime about anything. Completely confident in the fact that I'm right. And I'm willing to let you prove me wrong. If there's an issue that you think I'm dead wrong on, coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. If you're a candidate in the waning weeks of this election, and you'd like to come on the air for a half hour, an hour, and talk about why you need to be elected and what positive change you'll affect for the state of Rhode Island, coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. I won't even try and sell you commercials. You're welcome to buy some, by the way. Why they are avoiding debate beyond me. Given the insistence by conservative Republicans at the national level about the infallibility of all of their positions, it would seem like a slam dunk. And yet those incumbent progressives and those incumbent mainstream Democrats engage in the same behavior when they're the incumbents. They forget that need. The media would have you believe that there should only be one or two people on for viewability. I will remind you that some of the most compelling presidential debates in the 2016 election, not years ago, just most recently, occurred when I believe there were no fewer than 12 or 13 candidates on the stage, including someone who was made sport of at the time, possibly running in it from a similar position at a state level, might not have been allowed in the debate, but who actually became the president of these United States. If a candidate has fulfilled the basic requirements of getting on the ballot, and they are willing to debate, then damn it, we should let them. Damn it, we should require it. A libertarian requiring something. Again, harken back to my earlier comments. The organizations owning Channel 10, 12, 6 have been given exclusive, complete barrier to opposing entry license of the television broadcast airwaves. If you get up tomorrow morning and you want to erect a small transmitter and broadcast somewhere around there, the guys in the white FCC vans are going to come for you. Well, they just are. Because it's not that simple. Thank God for the internet. Thank God for social media. Because even though it's become a cloud, a cacophony of noise, there is at least the potential for individuals who might not be part of that mainstream duopoly to be heard. Because ultimately, the public airwaves have been hijacked. And that's never been more obvious than this election right now. And in a state where the theme song should be that disco tune from the 80s or 70s or whatever, I Need a Hero. In a state where there is so little originality, we have yet to hear that one great idea that might foment real change and affect a transition on the economy so that the wealth and benefits and success of Rhode Island could be shared by all those willing to invest the time and effort and work to do so. We haven't heard that. From Jeaner, we've heard more 1970s era crony corporate nonsense. From Alan Fung, we've heard about the murder rate, and we've heard about the murder rate, and we've heard about how he kept taxes low in Cranston. But again, where's that transformative idea? From Joe Trillo, again, who I like personally, don't know, Joe. Today, giving away $600 a person from a pension system that's effectively bankrupt. That at some level there was some effective reform passed by Gina when she was treasurer, even though she ended up giving away all those gains to her cronies on Wall Street. The notion of going back to that, just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We need to be getting people out of defined benefit plans and putting them into 401k style self-directed retirement plans, where the state is not continuing to subsidize a lifelong investment. I get the fundamental unfairness of promising people generations worth of guaranteed income and having that promise stolen from you. But whether it be Judge Flanders in Central Falls or people of common sense at this point, they're not the ones who lied to you. Look to a certain representative in Central Falls who was the town clerk, who has been there for all of it. She's the epitome of the leader, along with more Chuck for your buck Moreau and that tawdry cast of characters that ran Central Falls literally into the ground. They're the people that you should be frustrated with because they lied to you. They created a promise and a fiction that you would be entitled to an income for life when that's simply not possible. If the people who ran Rhode Island acted like the tax money was effectively they were stewards of, almost in a biblical sense, that might be possible. That ship sailed so many years ago. As Gina used to say back when it was almost good Gina, it's about the math. So continue to write checks to everybody. At this point, the fate is sealed. There really is no more to give out. We're looking at a $250 million bond issue that's being broadcast as a fix to the entire state, when in fact the reality, it's a handful of school districts who, again, refuse to implement any sort of financial discipline whatsoever. And while we understand that the urban core in the state possess certain challenges, that they are in fact the seat of a great deal of tax-exempt government, that in fact they are the seat of a significant part of the tax-exempt university crowd. There are benefits to all of that they fail to realize or fail to act upon, while simultaneously acting completely irresponsibly with their budgets. Providence is broke. Providence should be in bankruptcy. It's actually a failure of leadership that they're not. Providence needs to start over. The sooner it does so, well, look to the people of Central Falls. If you are politically connected, then the Central Falls bankruptcy cost you dearly. If you'd had a municipal job, yes, you took the proverbial haircut. But you did so that you would not lose everything. We've forgotten all of those lessons already. So here we are in the year 2018, without vision, without money, and really without a future. We're going to get back here in just a couple minutes. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage poor and free, nonsense-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. CoalitionRadio.us, which has been acting up the last few weeks. But you can always find us at Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio and the mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio. Again, next Saturday, the Road to Liberty, Rhode Island's first Liberty Forum, beginning what we hope is a tradition of bringing great minds, provocative thought, independent thinkers here to the state of Rhode Island. Tickets are available at lpri.us/forum, and they'll be available, well, probably up until Thursday or so. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me at coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. And again, if you're a candidate who wants to get in the next couple of weeks, in the run-up to the election, coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. So hopefully in a few minutes, Lauren Nidell will be joining us. If not, we'll have Nick Williams, he of the Teamsters, to talk about the aftermath of the strike. By the way, one of the other points, and I'd hope to get Nick in during the job action, but given the tumultuous nature of the event, what was at stake, it was a pretty busy guy. But as we did back when we were on WPRO on Coalition 1.0, when we spent an hour and a half with the Brotherhood of Correctional Officers here in Rhode Island, I would like Mr. Williams to give us a real feel for what it's like to be a school bus driver here in the city of Providence. I doubt that's as black and white as most people feel. We're going to get a flavor of the responsibility, the struggles, the tensions, all of that. And, of course, the compensation. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back in just a few minutes. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage, porn-free, civilly disobedient media. And as I said earlier in our opening, we are nonsense-free. And someone who is clearly not, well, he's got no tolerance for nonsense this year, is joining me as we await Lauren Nidell's arrival from, well, again, if you're a candidate, this is the most wonderful time of the year, is Darrell Gould. And Darrell is running for General Assembly, District 67. Did I get it right this time, finally?
Correct. Yes,
okay.
Yes,
and he had a debate this week and against the king of nonsense. And, of course, I'll say that's Jason Knight. If you want blather, if you want mental masturbation, if you want, well, a vast void, then you again vote for Jason Knight. Now Darrell, what was interesting was in the run-up to the debate, you revealed something about Mr. Knight that, oddly, seemed to be horrifying to his progressive supporters, and something about him and his cozy relationship with a certain Nick Mattiello. Tell us more about that.
Well, so Jason Knight is the textbook politician, which I obviously don't view myself as. I always view myself as somewhat of an advocate. But I think one of the interesting things about Representative Knight is the pool of hypocrisy that he steeps himself in. And by that, I mean a variety of things. He is self-identified as a progressive Democrat, which comes with its own baggage. The interesting about that is, and I always compare, I'm always going to compare myself to him. It's the obvious comparison. Being a libertarian, we have a very simple, principle and philosophy that we base, all of our political views on. So it's very easy to extrapolate my views, even without really speaking to me about it. With Mr. Knight, he can't really say that, and based upon his behavior versus what he says, there's often a very large chasm between the two. So as someone who has painted himself as the opposition and standing up to leadership, I find it very interesting that he voted with Speaker Mattiello 98.6% of the time.
Well, that's an ironic number.
Yeah, exactly. So
by the way, if this were a mature, responsible news reporting environment, we would not make temperature jokes in proximity to a certain speaker's butt. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So Representative Knight is the rectal thermometer at the State House.
Oh, hey now.
So there are literally only 5 legislators who vote more in line with Nick Mattiello, and Nick Mattiello is one of them. So he's 6th rank in the House as far as voting in line with leadership.
Wow.
So again, I'm not a Mattiello guy, but what do you stand for? Being a progressive, he's supposed to be for, the little guy, the disenfranchised. Then why are you supporting multiple millions of dollars of taxpayer money for corporate welfare to buy a ballpark?
Right.
What I found in the interesting thing for me, and it's Rhode Island, you never know how things are going to go. He's got the dreaded D in front of his name, so the chances of him being successful in a campaign, he automatically has a leg up, which we understand. But what's interesting now is, this is the Jason Knight that we saw in 2016. If you followed him, if you saw him in the debates, this is what you get. It's a lot of platitudes. There's not a lot of substance. It's a typical politician. He's non-committal on a lot of things, but he says a lot of nice words that make people feel warm and fuzzy inside. When the rubber meets the road, he doesn't walk the walk. And
let's talk about
one of the biggest challenges I have with him.
Let's talk about a perfect example of that. There was a law passed over I would say, the stern objections of the recovery community in this state. Yeah. And the recovery community, what's unique about it is it really represents a cross-section of political beliefs. There are libertarians in there. I'm proud to be a supporting member of their political action committee. You've actually done an appearance with the recovery community and those folks at the State House. There are certain forward-thinking Republicans in there. There are some conservative Democrats. Very often it's people who have come from a background where they've thought about the issue for a number of years, and or may have actually had family members touched by the tragedy of addiction. Jason Knight was all in on opposing this legislation. Give us a little background on that.
Well, so the legislation was referred to as Kristen's Law,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the origin of it. Obviously, is sad. Anytime you hear this legislation where it's Megan's Law or Amber or whatever, there's always some horrible story behind it, and those emotional stories are what people use to push this kind of legislation that may be well-meaning, but as we often see, misses the mark or doesn't accomplish or may even punish the people they're trying to protect.
Right.
So the legislation, in a nutshell, basically bumped up the legal and criminal responsibility of individuals who deliver narcotics. So, for example, and this is very common in the youth and for those who are actively using drugs, people will pool their resources. So, you have a couple of people sitting around and they're using and they're planning on using together. One of them might say, "Hey, I'm going to go see my guy and get whatever, heroin or meth or weed," and you pull your money together and you get a little bit more.
Right.
And it's always better to buy in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
So, if your friend were to go get these drugs and deliver them to you, unknowingly, there's fentanyl in the heroin,
right,
and you overdose, your friend who simply delivered the drugs could be prosecuted for murder.
Right.
And it's way over the top. It doesn't accomplish the goal. They were really looking at it to go after dealers and stiffen the penalties for them. Mm-hmm. But in this very big net that they cast, you're going to catch a lot of people who aren't criminals. They're people who are in the, whether drug addicts or whatever the case may be. These are people who they're not meaning to do harm.
Right. And
they're trapped in this system that could really punish them disproportionately for anything they may have done.
Right.
So the interesting thing about the recovery community is, and as you said, we've been somewhat active with them because we believe we shouldn't be criminalizing drug use and we need to treat it like a healthcare concern, and that's certainly where we line up with them. Being libertarians, some people in that group might not agree with us on some of our other political philosophies or principles, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of education. And Jason Knight does this. He paints us as selfish because we want to keep the fruits of our labor and not have the government steal it and give it away like they're trying to feed pigeons with it. So the interesting thing about that was the progressive politicians and activists really gravitate to that group. It's an emotional issue. It's low-hanging fruit for them. And Jason Knight, when this legislation was being proposed, met with people in the recovery community and basically told them this is important. It's important that this legislation does not go through. Mm-hmm. It's, this is the hill that I will die on. If this costs me my political career, I will stand up against this because it's what's right. So they were very excited to have an advocate. In as much as I was involved, he's also a sitting representative, so he has a little more ability to theoretically get things done. Right, absolutely. So long as he's true to his word. So not that they put their eggs in the Knight basket, but for lack of a better term, that's somehow where things went. It's understandable. They were all floored when they went to the State House the day of the vote, and when the legislation was being heard, Mr. Knight stood up and opined for 2 minutes about how this law was absolutely necessary, and he was voting in favor of it. So there were 20 people, give or take, from the recovery community sitting up in the nosebleed seats who were just in awe that this guy could sit down with them and be so fervent about his opposition. And then when the rubber met the road, he's down amongst his peers at the State House, and he totally flip-flopped on them.
Right.
So this is the Jason Knight I know. And unfortunately, and if you're not plugged in politically, and a lot of people aren't, I don't blame them. It just bears frustration for most people.
Right.
So ignorance is bliss, and you stay out of the details and, just kind of grin and bear it. And there's stories like this left and right about Jason Knight. He has a lack of understanding of the law, even though he's an attorney. He's not based on any principle. He's a hypocrite. He doesn't stand for anything. He says some flowery language when he speaks, but it's all meat, no potatoes. And nothing there.
And we will be replaying for your... I'm sorry, buddy. Go ahead.
No, and so it's something that we saw in the debate. I do have another debate with him at Warren Town Hall this coming Tuesday. The debate starts at 6 p.m. So this will be more in line for the folks on the Warren side of things. The last debate was in Barrington. But, my goal is really, much like I do on a daily basis for work, inform and educate. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like what I stand for. If you want to vote for Jason Knight, that's your prerogative. And I'm not going to berate people for that. I will certainly let you know exactly who you're voting for,
right,
and hold people accountable for it. So I'm more bothered by the fact that he's my rep than I am by the fact that I lost to him in 2016. And if I can't help recruit people to run against people like Jason Knight, and I have to do it myself, then so be it. So we'll fight the good fight. We'll stand up against him. We'll let everybody know who he is and what he does or doesn't stand for, and let the chips fall where they may.
Excellent. Now we will be replaying that memorable exchange between Alan Ghiberti of the Log Cabin Republicans and Mr. Knight in the testimony leading up to a number of the gun control laws, where Mr. Knight displayed total ignorance of the plight of young members of the LGBTQ community, and essentially looked at Mr. Ghiberti as if he was from outer space, when in fact Mr. Ghiberti is a articulate, thoughtful leader in the LGBTQ community, and was espousing, I believe, a highly rational approach to the right to one's self-defense. And so we'll be sharing that with people over in Facebook, because again, it's important. I mean, the nonsense and the spew that comes out, and the problem is that Rhode Island politics are ultimately short attention span theater. Folks work for a living. Folks are at this point working 2-3 jobs. Really, it's a question of survival for some folks. And if someone comes across to you with the platitudes and the smile and the vacant stare, so few people have the time really to vet what these folks actually stand for, as opposed to what urban legends and myths they propagate. It's depressing. It really is.
Well, and what was interesting about that whole situation with the recovery community was there's one individual who I tend to have a better relationship with than some of the others, and she had reached out to me. There was, for people who aren't aware, one of Knight's supporters planted one of his campaign signs in my front yard. I wasn't offended. That's all that's going on. That's not going to bother me. But I saw it as an opportunity to bring some attention to our race and bring up things like property rights. So, in the spirit of the Gatsby, I lit his political sign on fire and streamed it on Facebook. So, and of course, people who are centrist and conservative or liberty-minded, they thought it was fantastic. People on the far left, I was accused of being racist, or it was a symbol of hate, which we knew was coming, and I kind of preempted that in my formal response to the event. But what was interesting about it was that went somewhat viral locally, thanks to people like you and the good folks at GoLocal. Kate Nagel carried the story. And so people from the recovery community came out to my page to watch the video. And these are people who a lot of them are progressive leaning. And what was interesting was directly under my sign burning post was the post where I shared the information about Knight being in line with Mattiello 98.6% of the time. Even people who are politically active in that group, the people who helped start that PAC, had no idea that was actually the case. So the sign burning post, for lack of a better term, actually drew some people in who got to learn some information about who this guy really is. And they're saying, yeah, when he meets with us, he talks about being a voice against leadership and standing up. And they said, so it's really eye-opening for us that he votes with leadership as much as he does. And then they saw his behavior when the legislation was on the floor, and their support for him has certainly waned significantly,
right?
Since all this stuff came to light for them. And that's if that's what comes of things like this, then that's my job. It's, again, inform and educate, shine the light in the dark places, and expose people for who they are. And I hold myself to the same standard. I don't hide from anything. I often speak in the cuff. In my debates, it's much like somebody asking you about your day job, Pat. You don't need to rehearse or remember anything. It's what you do. And for many of us, this being in this political game is almost a full-time job. So I don't need to study. I just speak my mind, and I'm a stats guy. I'm an information guy, so I'm always going to lean in that direction with empirical data. But that's my job. I'll be the advocate for people, and I'll try and expose people for who they are, and explain why we need new things and need to head in a new direction.
And in closing, we got about a minute left, and Daryl, thanks for jumping on the lines.
My pleasure.
You're running against someone who self-describes as a progressive, who supports corporate welfare, supports the war on drugs, opposes the LGBT community's right to self-defense. Next thing we're going to find out, he's a Trump supporter. Sorry. Has anyone got proof that he voted for Hillary? That's what I want to know. Does anyone actually, can they prove it? Have they seen him and Donald Trump in the same room at the same time? That's what we want to know. Daryl Gould, now you're going to be out and about this weekend, right? There's a lot of things. There's the Warren Walk. There's all sorts of good things happening in Warren. I mean, people should be going downtown. I'm a big fan of Providence, obviously. We do the show downtown here. But, I've had the opportunity to go. I had dinner at the Square Peg a few weeks ago. Fabulous. Warren is particularly this time of year, it's beautiful all year round, but there's something special about the next couple of weekends in Warren, right? So there's the Warren Walkabout, is that what they call it?
The Warren Walkabout, which is basically a lot of the businesses do open house, so much like you said, Square Peg, Revival, all the great restaurants we have down there, Trafford, we have some great establishments, Galactic Theater.
Absolutely.
Which is this really eclectic. I'm a huge fan of the Galactic Theater. It's a great live music venue. So they'll be doing live music. The owner of that business, David Podsnap, who is he heads a band called Sasquatch and the Sickabillies. They'll be playing at the Square Peg. There's going to be a lot of live music. I know last year we had a piano out on the sidewalk where people were playing. All the shops are doing sales and open houses. So it's almost Warren almost turns into downtown Newport for the better part of a day. It's a great day to walk around. We have some new businesses opening up. We have a small bookstore, which is not the norm these days. Normally you hear about bookstores closing, but there's a great new bookstore that just opened up. They're going to be doing their stuff. So I'm really excited. I'm a small business guy, so nothing makes me happier than going downtown Warren and seeing these empty storefronts being filled up and people getting out there and patronizing these businesses. So I'm excited about this Sunday.
It's going to be happening. All right, Daryl Gould. He's full disclosure. He's been a longtime sponsor of this show, running for the General Assembly for District 67, Warren Barrington. He'll be out and about this weekend, and I guess it's almost cliche now, but it's interesting when people actually do it. Speaking truth to power. This campaign is all about ideas, but also exposing truths. And I think when we look at our General Assembly, Daryl, I think what needs to be said, and we're going to do it in our next segment because I've got a great candidate joining us in just a few seconds, Lauren Nidell. She's running for the General Assembly in the northwestern part of this a little roadie, but you know it's so important, it's so valuable that folks like you and Lauren run so these folks, even at the most primary level, do not run unopposed. If they run unopposed, then the myths and the legends are allowed to hang out there, and that's where real tragedy lies in a quote-unquote democracy. So, Darrell, what's your campaign? How can they find you about your campaign?
You can find me on Facebook. I do a lot of live streaming. You can find me at votegould, GOULD.com. Before I go, Pat, I just want to give a quick plug. The Libertarian Party of Rhode Island is having a Liberty Forum a week from tomorrow. That's October 27th at the Crown Plaza. We have some great speakers. Anyone who's interested in the Liberty movement, getting a different perspective. These are not just political but philosophical conversations. Like I said, great lineup of speakers. I encourage people to go out to lpri.us, not .com, lpri.us /forum. You can buy tickets there. I know the tickets have there's been a kind of a late rush, so get in there, get your tickets. It's going to be a great event. I'll be there. Pat will be there. A lot of prominent members of the Liberty community and the Libertarian Party locally are going to be there. So I encourage people, please come out. You know, our whole ability to help people and do the things we do, support businesses, taxpayers, is based upon these events being successful. So I encourage anyone listening or watching, please come out. If anyone has any questions, again, go to lpri.us. You can get a lot of information about the speakers and what the plan is for the day. So please do so.
All right, super. We'll be talking to you soon, Darrell. Thanks for dialing in.
Enjoy the rest of the show, Pat. I know I will.
All right, I'm going to ask her to join us right away so we don't lose any more time. Lauren Nidell is joining us. Lauren has been a regular contributor to the program for a couple of years now. I believe this is the first time. Come on in, have a seat, relax. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
All right. Normally we find each other at taverns and campaign stops across northwestern Rhode Island. But a little background. Lauren has been joining us for a couple of years now, usually on a remote, talking about the progressive movement, the Bernie Sanders campaign, a variety of, I would say, aggressive political causes here in the state of Rhode Island. Welcome live for the first time to the coalition.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
The connection's a lot better here when you're in studio than from the wilds of Foster, Gloucester. Now, tell us, you're running for General Assembly.
Yes. All
right, you're running against a longtime incumbent. What district? And give us a sense of the geography and what your district is like.
Sure. So I'm running in District 40, which covers all of Foster, most of Gloucester, and then it goes into Coventry, so into Green and Coventry. It's actually the largest geographical district in the state.
Yikes.
And it has also the largest percentage of unaffiliated in the state, at 70% in each precinct.
Wow.
I was really shocked when I did the precinct breakdown myself, 70% across the board in the 6 different precincts.
Wow. So, and it certainly is diverse.
Diversity is not the best way of putting it because it's 99.9% white.
Okay. Economically diverse. You've got,
a little bit, yeah.
you've got the beauty of northwestern Rhode Island mixed in with a different kind of geography, a different kind of beauty down in Coventry. What are their concerns? What are the concerns of the district you're running in?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of canvassing, something that is not done on a consistent basis because I hit up a lot of houses that say, and this is across the board, this is for all the candidates, that they haven't seen a candidate come to their door in years.
Wow.
So that's something that is definitely interesting, and that's in Gloucester. We've been canvassing Gloucester.
And now, let me jump in here. If you're canvassing in a suburban neighborhood in Warwick or Cranston, it's hard work, but you're going from house to house to house to house.
Yeah.
There's 30 feet in between houses.
Yeah.
What's it like to canvass in Foster, Gloucester?
So on each of my turfs that I've cut for myself, usually it's about 30 to 40 houses, and it takes me about 3.5 to 4 hours.
Wow.
There's a lot of geographical area in between. A lot of long driveways. There's not a lot of community areas where you can just walk it. So it is a challenge. I have a couple people right now, 3 people canvassing for me in the Harmony area of the farthest east of my area. And same thing. It takes them about 2-3 hours to do 30 houses. So it's across the board in that area. But people are great. What can I say? I'm shocked. You know, people are really good. You know, I'm hitting the doors of mostly unaffiliated. Hit a door that could for an unaffiliated, but of course you can get a Democrat that answers or a Republican that answers. It doesn't matter who answers. I talk to them. I don't look for the person who's on my list. I just look for the person that's opening the door. And we have good chats. We have good conversations. What's concerning? There's 3 big issues. People don't want the power plant. Geez, shocker, right? Gloucester, nobody wants the power plant. They know me from the anti-power plant movement. You know, people say, yeah, I know you. I heard about you from this person or that person. I said, yep, I know them too. They're all in Burrillville, but I'm real tight. And then solar installs. The big solar farms are a huge concern. There's one that they want to put up in Opelousas area in Opelousas Street in the Chepachet end of the Harmony end of Gloucester, and then Coventry is going through a lot of issues with permitting there. They want to put up several of them in the middle of Gloucester, and people don't want them either because we're against the clear cutting of our forestry, and that's a huge issue. Affordable housing, you know, we have a place going less than a mile from my house. It's under an affordable housing jurisdiction. They're putting one house in out of the 14. That's $200,000, and they're getting affordable housing money for it.
Wow.
So that's a big issue because we don't have the resources. So to give your listeners an idea, there's no septic, there's no water, there's no trash pickup. Those are all individual services that people have to maintain themselves. So therefore, there's the lack of resources makes it challenging for, especially for big businesses to move in or even small businesses, and it makes it challenging for you know, to put in some of these complexes where they require a huge amount of water or connection to city services, which we don't have any.
Right.
So.
Are people optimistic in your district? Are they, you know, it's hard to really gauge Rhode Islanders. You know, if you listen to talk radio, you know, you hear people who at this point are very, very cynical. It's very hard to get an honest reflection of what, if there even is such a thing as an average Rhode Islander. But in your district, you find people optimistic, you find them troubled. How are they feeling?
People hate the way the government is run. The anti-Raimondo sentiment is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's bigger than any other single politician, pro or con. It is huge. It kind of took me, you know, it kind of took me back a little bit. I am running as an anti-establishment candidate.
Right.
Unbeknownst to my opponent, Mike Chippendale, who thinks I can be strong-armed into going along with leadership. Not happening.
Right.
Anybody who isn't blocked by Mike Chippendale can let him know that I said that. Yeah, so that's a big issue. But because I'm anti-power plant all the way and people know it, people trust me. People know that I'm not just going to, you know, go along with Raimondo either on what her policies or what she wants to push through in the General Assembly, and I make that quite clear, that we don't see eye to eye. We really don't.
To say the least.
To say the least. So, you know, I promote myself as an independent Democrat. I don't want to, you know, I'm not an independent. I belong to the Democratic State Committee, and I butt heads with them. I belong to my Gloucester Democratic Town Committee, which is struggling, but it's there. And I was on the Platform Committee, and we know the issues that happened with the Platform Committee regarding Johnston and a couple of other events. So I've been kind of part of that resistance in the conservative Democrats that are in the party that feel that they own the party and that progressives, real progressives, don't have a place. and that's not dissimilar to what happened in 2016 with the Bernie Sanders campaign as well. So this is all like repeating itself, and it's like, why aren't folks, the Democratic Party isn't really focusing at all on northwestern Rhode Island? Well, why? Because it's viewed as a strong Trump area, and it's just going to go Republican anyway. Although Reed's office did reach out to me, which was very nice.
And that's stunning, given the power plant issue being so pervasive at every level of politics, and really the entire, if you were to somehow divvy the state up into four quadrants, the entire upper left quadrant, really from the reservoir on up. We had a candidate, Mr. Fine, last week. He's running for office, and the reservoir is in his district, and he was very vocal, obviously, in his opposition. And here's someone who I would probably describe as a moderate to progressive leaning Democrat, but certainly not a flame, carrying torches.
Not me.
Yeah, right. But he had a very mature, responsible. Alicia Kelly is running his campaign, and he had a really great take on the entire situation. And so for the quote-unquote mainstream Democratic Party, which I believe is will be replaced in 2 weeks, because they're out of touch with history, they're out of touch with reality, and listen, you talked about affordable housing. As I look out onto Way Boston Street, to my immediate left is a building that was converted into high-end lofts by a prominent member of I'll call it the legacy conservative, quote-unquote self-described pragmatic Democrats, who see no problem in a city like Providence providing all sorts of subsidies for loft-style living.
Horrible.
And in doing so, whether you or I disagree on economics, I think we agree that if government tax subsidies shouldn't be used to sponsor private businesses, and that simultaneously, by screwing with the markets and providing incentives for high-income housing, for which there is no guaranteed demand, you're actually taking the oxygen out of the room for the market, seeking its natural place in supplying moderate to lower income housing for people who are desperate for it in this state.
Yeah. I would love to see the arcade type facilities, apartment living, micro
lofts, yeah.
I love the arcade. It's awesome. I would love to see that in 3 or 4 different parts of the city. I would love to see something like the Freehand Hotel in Providence, which focuses on quad services, doubles, and plays out to people looking for affordable places to stay overnight. The student traveler, etc. I think that's a perfect place, perfect type of facility to come up in Providence, something that we don't have. The same problem that I'm seeing across the board is that people are thinking of, have 1950s way of thought for a 21st century economy. Same thing with the power plant. That's a 1950s, type of development. Same thing with high-rise hotels. Or apartment living. That's 1950s. We need 21st century. We need affordable, accessible, lively. We need, little bars in all these places. People love that. Coffee houses in all these little places. People love that. Places of community. That's what people want. They don't want places that, oh, look at my view for, $7,000 a month or whatever, which is crazy pricing for the city.
Right. And to me, one of the great, I'm so frustrated with this election because, in the run-up to the show, and Matt Allen was nice enough to entertain a conversation with me about this today in WPRO. Outrage porn is alive and well, and nonsense is alive and well in this campaign. We missed a generational opportunity in having a conversation about Route 610.
Oh yeah, that hits us too, where I live. So
right. So what you talk about 1950s thought process. We are spending an enormous amount of money to replicate a failed transportation pattern that no longer meets the needs of the 21st century, while simultaneously drags an economic dagger through the heart of Cranston and South Providence. And we're spending an enormous amount of money to do it because of the rush, in my thoughts, of Gina Raimondo making sure her campaign contribution base is fulfilled.
Right.
You know, we couldn't have taken a year off and said, okay, what's our vision? If in fact, I'm a libertarian. I'm not.
Is there a vision?
Well, there is no vision.
There's no vision. Let's face it, there's no vision. How could there have been a vision initially when you can get off 610, but you can't get back on it?
Well,
you have to go through Westminster and whatever you have to do in order to get back on Route 6 to go back towards my end of the state.
Right.
It's crazy.
And what's amazing is in so many parts of the country, they're taking roads like that using traffic calming techniques, creating commerce on the sides of them, so to encourage, to sort of knit back those neighborhoods, so that there is a look again. It's like a scar through the center of the state. Yeah. There is no commerce. There is no sense of community. There is nothing. Whereas you could have easily laid a groundwork for some type of and again, I'm a libertarian, so I'm going to say lay a groundwork for perhaps private industry to come in and put in at their own risk, capital, some type of mass transportation system down the heart of that highway. You could have easily done that. You could have easily incorporated green spaces into that. I mean, there's 100 different things you could do, and
they do the absolute worst possible thing they could possibly do,
which was just more of the same.
More of the same, right?
And we won't have another opportunity financially to look at that for in our lifetime. It will be another 40 to 75 years before you can rethink that space.
And nobody wanted it except a very small class of labor and developers.
Right.
It was a very, very small percentage of people who wanted it. Certainly the taxpayers of Providence, Cranston did not want it. We didn't want it. People who may travel Route 6 West. It serves no purpose, and it was another failed, it's going to be another failed development project. I mean, and I'm going to go back a little bit to CNC.
Right.
I mean, we certainly have our differences, a lot of issues, with Mayor CNC. He did have a vision. People may not have totally agreed, but it was a vision. It was a completed thought process about moving the river. And, you have to give him respect. That has really played well into things like water fire, into things like commerce, into things like building up tourist industry inside the city. And that is missing, that kind of, real heart love for the city, as opposed to what's in it for me.
Right.
And I think the what's in it for me, who's going to give me money from this, the nepotism, the political bargaining behind closed doors, that's more of an issue and a concern than how will this help the 99%.
Right.
And there's none of that. There is absolutely none of that with leadership in Rhode Island.
One of the things that to me that's most disturbing is the arrogance of what I call the Rhode Island's obsession with the central urban core. So Rhode Island is all about Pawtucket.
Right.
Rhode Island's all about CF. Rhode Island's all about Providence, Warwick, and Cranston.
Yep. Now,
there lies beyond those towns a great world called the rest of Rhode Island. Cumberland, Wooney, the western part of the state.
Blackstone Valley, northwestern Rhode Island, yeah.
Right, go down to southwestern Rhode Island, Coventry, towns like that. Go down to, quote unquote, the mythical South County. We continue to treat Aquidneck Island like it's an ATM machine. We take. We don't invest. We invest. All to support a handful of towns right here in the area, and that's got to be maddening for your constituents.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm running on is that northwestern Rhode Island concerns are swept under the rug. They're not brought into play. They're not heard. I don't feel that Chippendale or Senator Fogarty did a good job in making the case for northwestern Rhode Island. I specifically remember 2 years ago when we had that whole gypsy moth devastation in northwestern Rhode Island. And I remember Raimondo saying it's not a big deal, it's not a big concern. All of our trees were stripped bare. And from that, you're seeing tons of trees still dead that are now coming down, where you're getting branches upon branches every single solitary windstorm from these damaged trees. And then some of these trees are now going through a blight process, even though the gypsy moth devastation was for 3 years and it didn't hit that 4th year, which really would have killed the entire area. But all Raimondo had to say was that it's not really an issue. Well, it's because her voter base, her donor base, doesn't happen to fit into the Northwest Rhode Island quadrant.
her donor. The only way to affect her donor bases would be if the Miracle Mile in Chicago or downtown LA was affected.
New York, maybe.
You know.
So, and people are upset. People are upset that, you know, we're invisible. You know, I joked with somebody. They said, you know, there was a picture of Connecticut in his, you know, is Eastern Connecticut part of Rhode Island? And I said, is Western Rhode Island part of Connecticut? You know, which nobody wants into any of those towns, right? Nobody wants Killingly. Connecticut doesn't want Killingly. Rhode Island doesn't want Foster and Gloucester. They're just like nomads, you know. Nomad cities.
And it would be interesting to see a study of, you know, amount of money taxes in, what comes back out, and, you know, and which to me, you know, again, this is where you and I will probably describe why much more power has to be driven back to the municipal level, and much less. Well, you're then much less emphasis needs to be on this centralized state government, who seems only to care for their own, and the rest of the state be damned.
Yeah, and I mean, I can say similar things with Senator Whitehouse. You know, every single time I hear Senator Whitehouse, it's about South County, it's about the oceans, it's about, you know, Newport, it's about Aquidneck, it's everything relating to the richer populations of the state.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet, except for the opioid crisis where he did mention Burrillville briefly, I have yet to hear him have any concern whatsoever for the lakes, for, you know, the green, for the forestry. I mean, our lakes are critical to the Rhode Island.
Our aquifers, our water table, which is one of the reasons why he should be using whatever, you know, he should be doing the smackdown on this Invenergy thing, because it's just the potential for real disaster, regardless of whether you're Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, whatever. Disaster doesn't respect party boundaries.
Absolutely. You know, even in my area where they want to build a so-called affordable housing, which I think is a joke, they want to put in 14 houses. We have limited water. We have, the aquifers are going to know that, okay, stop here, you know, and our aquifers are the central base for, you know, our life. You know, water is life, and that's where our life is. It's in our lakes, it's in our forestry, it's in our green space, and we are not given any type of, you know, credibility for wanting to preserve that.
Right.
And there's that cookie cutter approach. The affordable housing that you have in Central Falls and Providence has to be mirrored in Gloucester. No, you can't do that.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get across, is that you can't, you know, I may be in favor of affordable housing. I may be, you know, not necessarily saying that mobile home parks can't be considered affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
They're affordable, they're housing, people live there, it's a sense of community. Why shouldn't that be part of the 10%? And I've heard progressives say, well, you know, it could be damaged during a hurricane or during a tornado or something. It's like, no, it's not going to happen. We don't have to be so concerned with the 1% of issues versus this is where people live 90, you know, their lives. And maybe more money should go into building up those areas, providing more community services, making it nicer places to live. Although they're very nice, I've seen them. And you know, why should we discard them? That's not our vision of affordable housing. But that is affordable housing, and that should be part of the vision. Again, it's disregarding it because they're saying that these people don't count.
Right. Right.
There's not enough money to be made from for mobile home parks, which, you know, should be part of the picture.
Right, and there's also the lack of a significant voting bloc in one centralized area, which quite frankly is what carries certain politicians to victory every time. Gina will, if she wins re-election, it will be because of her support in this part of the urban core.
Right, the Latino community will carry her for sure.
Right, and regardless of whether or not she's broken most of her promises to that community. I'm not sure why they endure her. I'm not sure why they didn't come out and support Matt Brown or any of the other viable candidates, Spencer Dickinson. Quite frankly, what's crazy if you're a third-party guy like me is you see people voting directly against their own self-interest, not out of some patriotic desire for the greater good, but simply out of urban myths, legends, beliefs that aren't grounded in reality.
People are convinced that the letter in front of the person's name is what they stand for and platform issues and values. People are convinced that way, and we know in Rhode Island that is simply not the case, as is many other states, by the way. It's more and more coming out that there's so many people that are backtracking on progressive values or just use it for campaign slogans, and then as soon as they get in, similar to your previous conversation, they backtrack and then they go back on the image that they brought out. Now people see that image in 2 years ago and they assume that's what's happening with that same image now. And people just don't know what's going on at the state level.
Right, and hence our frustration with the representative from District 68. I'm not going to put you on the spot with him, but again, for him to vote in support, overtly in support of that the quote unquote drug murder law, for him to support a baseball stadium, it was just beyond the pale.
Yeah, absolutely.
If in fact if you self-identify as a progressive, well, that's fine. That's your choice. Be a progressive. Just don't, is there such a thing as a Pinot? Progressive in name only?
I'm beginning to think so, yeah.
It's
to the credit of my opponent, Mike Chippendale, who sided with Maura Walsh on this, he voted against Kristen's law.
Right.
I would have absolutely 100% voted against Kristen's law. People know where I feel on the Paw Sox subsidy. When Worcester, have fun with that. That's all I'll say.
Knock yourself out, babe.
Knock yourself out. Enjoy the 5 years of fame and the 50 years of torture. Go for it.
Hey, what's $100 million
Yeah,
for
what's
Worcester?
$100 million? Right, and then of course you have the budget of Massachusetts, which could absorb that way better than the budget of Rhode Island.
Well, we're still, remember always in this year's budget there will be a line item to pay for 38 studios. Yeah. Always remember that, which is probably roughly analogous to what, a
your moral obligation line.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We have yet to pay that off. We have yet to pay. My understanding is we have yet to pay the tobacco bond off. So, sleep tight, Rhode Island. Now, I've only got a couple minutes. While you're here, just a quick minute or two, if you will, on the continuing schism between the progressive Democratic movement and the mainstream Democratic movement. In Liberty world, we've had, some of my best friends are Republicans.
Yeah.
But there's a viable outlet called the Libertarian Party if your views on certain social issues differ from, say, Republicans. Do you see at any point in time, if in fact you still have this sort of arm wrestling going on after this election, if you're still stalemated, do you see the emergence of a progressive party separately, or do you think it's just the battle is still going to continue to be held in the Democratic Party?
Well, one of the things, if I do get elected, one of the things that I will definitely work on and hopefully establish is a progressive caucus. Mm-hmm. It's been talked about, it's been thought about, but there's always been roadblocks to stop it, either from progressives themselves or just not the will. Well, I think that time has come. We need to have a progressive caucus. That needs to be established right away. I think you're seeing a lot of progressive-leaning Democrats, women, and Bernie Sanders supporters that are fed up with Mattiello. His statement the other day was, that got a lot of attention on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I think that is cause for concern again. So I think that's still, a boiling point with a lot of people either running for office or people supporting candidates or at this point supporting Frias. You know, so I think there's that going on, and then the dynamics that are happening. It's there are definitely dynamics with people offended by Democrats like myself who believe in the party platform, who want the platform to go further, but then we're outcasts because we're considered problematic to the party, and that we're not looking at the big tent philosophy, and that we're not inclusive enough, and that we're fringe and we're socialists or this, that, and the other thing. And they still, there's some that want to keep us out.
There's a scene from The Sound of Music where what do we do about it? I have this mental image of certain Democratic leaders. What do we do about it? Damn they Lauren. At which point you're supposed to come and say the hills are alive. But I mean, I just have that mental image.
Northwest Hills are alive.
The Northwest Hills are alive. Well, how can folks find you on the web?
So I am. You can email me at my initials, which happen to be LNG for RI District 40 at gmail.com, and Lauren for RI District 40 on Facebook are my two favorite ways of receiving comments. My information is, I'm transparent. You can actually see all of my issues on my Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a website, I'm bad. But all my
Facebook
issues
works.
are on my Facebook page, from soup to nuts. And I encourage people, hey, how do you feel about this issue or that issue? Well, if I need to look into it, I will. But more than likely, I'll have a viewpoint on it, and I will be able to tell you. I don't change my point of view if I'm talking to a libertarian, a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent.
Mm-hmm.
People respect that. I tell it like it is. If they ask me my viewpoint, it's going to be the same answer across the board, no matter who I speak to. And transparency is critical with me, as is not blocking people, because I've certainly spoken to a lot of people that are negative, but if they're potential constituents, then they have a say.
Because ultimately you're a representative to everyone.
I represent everyone. I don't pick and choose the ones that I represent based upon political philosophy, not wanting different free speech issues, etc. But I am an open book, and people can also find me, the writer on RI Future. You can see some articles, past articles on RI Future, Uprise Rhode Island. I've written on that. And often what you're going to see is somebody who is challenging the establishment. Excellent.
Thank you so much for coming in.
It was a pleasure.
All right. Good luck in the campaign.
Thank you.
Mike Chippendale is still welcome to come on the show, as he is welcome to debate you, correct?
We could do any forum that he so chooses, and he chooses not to engage in any forum. So
Right.
he
So,
said he would.
Well, Mike, if Mike listens to this, or friends of his, I bear no ill will to Mike Chippendale. I invite him to come on the show and have a chat. And again, there's only a couple of weeks left in the campaign, but there's always time for spend 20 minutes, a half hour in a debate, and to have some fun while we do it at the same time.
Absolutely. I'm game.
Excellent. I know you are. You fear no one.
I know, that's it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, as always.
All right, we're going to take about a 20-second break. Waiting in the wings is someone that I've wanted to get on the show for a long time, just like Lauren. He's here in studio as well. In fact, I'm just going to ask him if he wants to just come right out after they do the handoff with the microphone. For the record, for people who listen to the show or might come across this show in the coming weeks, I am decidedly pro-private labor union. Now, for a lot of folks, that may be a surprise. I'm a libertarian. I believe in the free association of individuals, whether it be for commerce, as is in the case of labor unions, whether it be purely for social needs. The one area I might disagree with people in private labor unions is whether or not membership is mandatory. We'll talk about that for a couple minutes. But ultimately, there are three components of capital. Economists will talk about they will talk about raw materials, they will talk about finance, and they will talk about labor. We as a society routinely, and we as investors routinely applaud capital formation when it aggregates in groups that actually provide economies of scale and strengthen the marketplace. And we look upon that as a positive. We applaud, the market will often applaud, in respect to higher valuations if in fact it makes the business more efficient, or if it makes the business more profitable. Come on in.
How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. we talk in the same way about raw materials. You know, if in fact a steel supplier can merge with another steel supplier and they can gain advantages in the marketplace, we applaud that if in fact it increases profits. Well, why then it would seem from certain quarters anyway, the bias against labor unions? Labor unions are nothing more than a group of individuals coming together to gain economies of scale and power, well, in the marketplace. What are you entitled to in this life? Whatever the hell you can get. So when we applaud higher margins from, say, Apple Computer or US Steel or Coca-Cola, they come at our expense. Yes, if they make more money, that means we paid more. Now, the same thing is true of labor unions. Now, my father was a member of a labor union for 40 years. He was a member of the United States Postal Service. Arguably one of the most dangerous places in the 1970s and the 1980s to work in America. Shocked? You shouldn't be. As is true with the government so often, OSHA at that time was only allowed in by invitation only. So the safety and security that most manufacturing sites, employers, contractors all feel, and feeling that there's a federal government presence looking down upon them, simply doesn't exist when you work for the federal government. They'd gone almost 20 years without a raise. The American Postal Workers Union had a resurgence in the 1960s and the 70s under the head of a gentleman by the name of Mo Biller. Mo kicked some butt. And that's why the reason your host enjoyed a higher standard of life as a young man growing up, was able to attend private university, and was afforded a number of opportunities because his father was a member of a labor union. You know, any business enterprise, whether it be in treating their consumers, whether it be in treating their employees, the notion that folks are going to do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do, I'll use the naive word, and I say that in the friendliest way possible, because ultimately all of business, all commerce is profit driven. Profit is not a dirty word. Profit is the mechanism by which individual business can grow and create wealth and create opportunities. But at the same time, we must not allow individual workers to occupy sort of a second citizen status in the entire flow of an economy. If they wish to gather together to gain power, to gain presence in the marketplace, well, they should be allowed to, right?
They have that freedom of association, absolutely.
Absolutely. Nick Williams, welcome,
Yes.
welcome to the coalition for the first time.
Thank you.
I had a few years back, I had a gentleman from the Teamsters on. We were actually not, he was on the air. We were talking about some of the organizational issues at Twin Rivers back when when there was an action by the valets and some of the I'll call it the labor type work that was occupying at Twin River. The Teamsters are a long and storied organization, a lot of history there, very provocative organization. But one of the things I've always admired about the Teamsters is the fact that as a union, you're willing to organize people of lesser means, and I say this with respect, jobs that traditionally have been, I think, left on the side. People who have become marginalized because their job may not hold the panache, if you will, that other jobs do. But at the same time, they have the right to organize, don't they?
Yeah, and they have a right to a living as well. So.
Absolutely. So I wanted to have you in, and this is, to me, is perfect timing, because everybody wanted to talk to you a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. There was a labor union, there was a work stoppage at First Student, the bus provider to the city of Providence, and there was much outrage aimed at you folks. I think somewhat unfairly, because, well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because I want to talk about, I want to focus less on the settlement. We'll just talk about that for a minute or two, because I think there's kind of a misunderstanding out there in the public at large as to what actually happened at the end, what type of settlement occurred in terms of what type of retirement plan. But I want to focus more on the time we're together, the job pressures. What's it like to drive a bus in the city of Providence in the year 2018? And a brief shout out, and I'm going to finally shut up and turn it over to you, but a brief, 2 years ago when we were in version 1.0, I would believe I was actually filling in for Dara Granahan, I had Mr. Ferrucci from RIBCO, Rhode Island Brotherhood of Correctional Officers in. And we spent a provocative hour or so talking about the reality, not the myth, the reality of working conditions for the average correctional officer. And that's really what I want to focus on, because we put your members in a position of great responsibility. a great amount of pressure. They are there is really zero tolerance for failure.
Agreed.
I mean, just zero. They, by all accounts, and I'm not making light of the troubles that Ripter has had in the last couple of years, but by all accounts, they operate at a very high level. And so we need to emphasize that as much as their desire for, and my words, economic justice.
No, agreed.
So tell us a little bit. Well, first of all, tell us about the Teamsters, who you represent here in Rhode Island. Your kind of the structure. You know, you've got a union local, and who do you work with?
So we have over 6,000 members. Mostly we have 2,500 of them over at Rhode Island Hospital. We have another, I believe, 750 at UPS. Your UPS man is a Teamster, and the rest of them are kind of spread out among the smaller groups. But my assignments are mostly public sector, and anybody who has a contract with the government is basically who I cover. That would include housing authorities. We have some DPWs throughout the state. Bus drivers, not only in Providence, but in Warren and Pawtucket and Portsmouth, a few other places. So that's pretty much what we do. And we represent those workers. We negotiate the contracts and their working conditions.
Now, in this case, and like I said, I just want to focus for a couple of minutes on what happened. Kind of let's do a post-mortem, because the media is very poor at following up after the fact. So the primary claim, as I understood it, was the desire to have some type of pension plan. What did they have beforehand? What do they have now?
So the entire catalyst behind the whole pension thing, and that's all that was pushing the media, was the pension, was we had an agreement with the company. We had a contract. We had a 401k with a match of I believe it was $350. Don't quote me on that. It's $325 was last year. The company was not making their required contribution into my members' 401k. Everybody was fine with the 401k until we found out they weren't making the match. We were able to prove that they weren't making the match. They denied it. They said that, you know, Wells Fargo lost the money. It's going to be put in there. The excuses were never ending. It's a glitch. So my members said, you know what? This is all I do. This is what they do for a living. Right. A lot of people think it's a part-time job, but a lot of these drivers work over 40 hours, and if they want to, they're motivated. They can work over up to the 60-hour DOT driving time. So they're definitely, you know, full-time. If they want to be, and you know, this is their only chance at retirement. This is going to be their job. Some of them have been there 30 years. So to have that match and not have the company not putting the money in is a problem.
And for the record, should the company, and I'm just saying this generically as any company, not specifically for a student, should the company go bankrupt, they're out of luck.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's no comeback, there's no clawback provision other than any other secured debtor to get that money back. So, and once the money is transferred into it, then it's a protected asset.
Then it's protected, correct.
Okay.
So while the company's holding on to it, it's not ours. And I mean, you take this year, our contract language says they'll match the first $350 that my members put in. Here we are in October, and I just have proof. I just got proof yesterday from one of my members that they only put in $118 so far.
And again, let's look at that for a second.
Yeah.
That's $350 a year.
Yep.
Match.
A multi-billion-dollar corporation that I end up having to hire lawyers and pay thousands of dollars to litigate to get that $350. It's ridiculous.
$350.
Couldn't get it up. Even with a contract.
Yeah. I mean, it's more. I mean, just forgive my surprise. It's got to be more damn expensive than them to fight it than just to write the damn check.
I believe it is. I believe it is, and I don't know what's going on there. They're saying it's a glitch. Every time I ask, it's a different excuse. So I don't know. I don't think they know what's going on, to be honest with you. But we don't care what's going on. We know it's not coming to us, and that's a problem, especially when we have a contract. So what they were looking for was a secure retirement. And we figured that the only way that we could get that was through the Teamsters New England Trucking Pension Fund, which would be a required contribution by the employer. We would have oversight over it, and it would go directly into it, and it would be a defined benefit,
right?
Which is at the end, which has a lot of controversy behind it. I'll admit it, but we're a private fund. We're not putting them onto the City of Providence's pension fund. We're not adding more stress to an overstressed out system. We were putting them into what's called a legacy plan that we have in our pension plan. So when the Pension Reform Act came out, we had to do something, because we were, in that category where I believe we were 55% funded, and we had to do something to make that money up. And obviously, we had the baby boomers retire, which was a big hit, and the people replacing them aren't, putting in at the same amount. So what we did was we created a new pool. It's a new employer pool. There is zero liability upon any other employee other than your own, if you're a company coming in, and we've gotten over 60 employers into that. And there's no risk to the employer except for their own contributions. If they don't make them, they're liable.
Right.
So that's what we were trying to get them into. It would have been a defined benefit. The company wanted no part of that. They kept saying that the fund was underfunded. There was a liability, and that's true of the legacy fund, but not the fund that we were trying to get them into. So there was some miscommunication that was going on. So
they have a separate plan
Yes.
with a separate pool of money that's been established under Teamster management.
Yes.
Right. So it's a true defined benefit plan for the beneficiary of the benefits of the people currently employed and then moving forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was what the fight was over. We ended up having to go on strike, which is not an easy thing for us to do. I mean, normally the Teamsters, we fight corporate America every day, and there's never an innocent third party involved. It's us against the company, and our employees are the only real people that go without a check or without a service, besides their customers, which can usually go somewhere else. Here we have the entire city of Providence. So what we did was, before we were ready to strike way before we did, we gave a 21-day cooling off period. And we said, listen, 21 days, we're not going to meet. Let's, meet with I'll meet with my international. You meet with corporate. See what you can figure out. This is what we need, and just kind of let it go. We came back from that 21-day cooling off period, and I had notified the mayor at that time that we would strike when it was over. When we came back, they had no answers for us. We had a couple more ideas. The company wasn't interested in it, so we gave another 5 days. Notice, so that it would be at the end of a week, so it would be Thursday, Friday, was when the strike would start. Hopefully just be 2 days, we'd get this done and we'd be over. We met with the company a couple times during that, and we got absolutely nowhere. And it was button heads. That's all it was.
Do you think they just thought you wouldn't go through with it?
They thought that we wouldn't strike. They thought that we weren't serious about it. They thought, they're at the table not taking us seriously, saying, oh, it's just a glitch, we'll fix it and we'll be fine. Like, this isn't a major issue. The number one issue from my group of 220 bus drivers was a pension. That was their number one ask.
Right.
And we're a democratic union. I don't tell my members what they want. They tell me, and if I don't get it, I get voted out. So this is how our organization operates. So when I have 220 bus drivers holding my feet to a fire on a pension, I'm going to fight every way I can. Taking that strike action was a part of it. The members did vote on the strike action, so it was what that's how serious they were.
Why do you think, and we'll get into working conditions a little bit, but overall, what struck me was the degree of animosity from a lot of individuals. I'm not, I'm a libertarian, I'm not an emotion guy, but I was astonished at the kind of vitriol that was spewed by people who really had no stake in it other than this generic hatred of individuals. And I'll use the hatred word because it was, and that's just from an outsider perspective.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the phone calls you're getting or whatever, but why are people in general so upset about other people just simply trying to negotiate a better life for themselves?
Yeah, I wonder that all the time, being a business agent and being on Facebook and active on social media. And I'll tell you, that's where that hatred was. On that picket line, there were people beeping. The news cameras couldn't even get an interview in. There were people beeping and supporting us. And,
Right.
And, it was a lot of energy on that picket line, a lot of support from the community. But on the Facebook end of it, I always say, it's easier to complain about somebody getting what they want than actually getting up and fighting for it yourself. So that's how I see it. I have no idea why they would begrudge someone a secure retirement. Especially when I could see maybe if it was public dollars, but we're talking about a private company here.
Right, who's well compensated and negotiated a contract based. And again, as a libertarian, I'm an outsourced kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I have no problem when a private entity bids for something, represents something, and then is challenged by the marketplace. And you folks are nothing but part of the marketplace.
That's it. And, the company found themselves on the wrong end of a supply and demand issue, too, because we're down 300 drivers across the state before the strike.
Right.
That's why they couldn't get anybody in to drive the buses. Because what would have been the ideal situation for us to fight this company would be to have another company come in and run the buses while we were negotiating.
Right.
Because that way, the city would get what they needed. They would, the children would go into school. They wouldn't be the innocent victim here, and we would be able to battle this company while they are not making money. You know what I'm saying? So that was what our goal was. But there was no one to drive the buses, and I worked with the mayor. He asked me if we could get the drivers for First Students buses for the special needs kids. Would you let them roll? And I said absolutely. Those families have been through enough. Yes, let's get those kids to school somehow, some way. There was no drivers. There were no drivers. So, in a fair marketplace, supply and demand, they were on the wrong end of it.
Well, and how did it get to the point, as someone who's been intimately involved in this process, I think what also astonished a lot of Rhode Islanders, there was no plan. I guess, and again, not a big government guy here.
Yeah.
You're probably picking that up. But
No, listen, I identify with the Libertarian Party in a lot of ways. Usually a labor guy. So.
We pay these government types. A lot of my frustration with government types is the middle level management types. The current governor, I'm not going to involve you in political discussion here per se with personalities, but let's just say Rhode Island is not shy about paying upper 5-figure salary to 6-figure salaries for middle level management. Part of middle level management's job, if you're in government, all right, and particularly is to ball game and war plan for disasters and challenges. Now, how is it in the year 2018 we get this to this point in time where there is absolutely no plan in place? I mean, much less a strike. Let's just say nationally, a number of these bus companies have organized into conglomerates. Greyhound and the people surrounding Greyhound own First Student. They own one of the more popular, quote unquote, new age rideshare bus companies. They are truly a conglomerate.
Yep.
Conglomerate who quite frankly has a troubled past in terms of their international financial picture.
Yep.
So never mind a strike. What happens if these guys go belly up? How do we not have a plan for kids to get kids to school in the seemingly almost likely event that at some point in time in the next 10 years that the primary bus service upon which they've got complete reliance goes bleep up?
So that was amazing to me too as well, because when I first went into this, I wasn't familiar with the ins and outs and the boilerplate language with the contract that First Student had with the city. I knew how much they were getting, and that's all I really cared about. But then when once we started the strike and I met with the mayor, and this exact fight happened in Seattle in February. And what got the two sides together was the mayor came out, he threw on his cape, and he said, listen, every day these buses aren't running, we're fining First Student $1.2 million. Guess how quick that strike got settled. So I gave that to the mayor, and I told him, but apparently in the contract that they have with the city of Providence, they have what's called force majeure language, which is, it's a disaster. It protects you from disaster on unforeseen events. Like if there were a hurricane, they wouldn't provide the service, and they can't be held accountable. If there was something that an act of God, they wouldn't be able to provide the service, and the city can't hold them accountable. And in that force majeure language, they put labor strike.
Wow.
That struck me as odd. I hope they got a lot for it. I don't know what they got, but that's the reason that the city was basically powerless in all this. And it was, we would almost look to the city like, we want to get these kids to school too, put some pressure on this company, but there was nothing the city could do. And that was really when it was, a lot of pressure that's not normally on our shoulders came on our shoulders, because usually there's a backup plan and the kids are going to school while we're negotiating, and now, 9,000 kids not getting to school is on my shoulders to get this strike settled. So it was unexpected.
And again, think of it, a bad storm wipes out. I mean, we saw it in New Orleans, we saw it in Florida.
Yep.
I happen to work and sell vehicles. I work in the transportation business. It's sadly not uncommon across the country where an entire geography will simply lose all its vehicles.
Yeah, no, it's possible.
And that same lack of preparedness would exist then, because there seems to be no concern about a backup. There's no concern about any type. I don't know what, again, my words, not yours. I don't know what the hell they do up there all day. I mean,
I'll tell you, if they're looking for somebody to help negotiate a contract, they definitely wouldn't have allowed that in there. So I'm gonna hire. I'll provide work for free on that one. Pro bono.
so you have this terrible situation where there's really no onus, there's no penalty, there's on the provider to supply their services. You've got a real credibility issue with the financials because they magically can't provide the check.
Yeah.
Or proof that they're meeting the contractual obligations. You have a mayor, again, my words not yours, who politically at this point is relatively impotent anyway, getting up there and trying to pound, all it was missing was the shoe on the desk.
Yeah.
But absolutely not. And the worst thing, as you know, is if you threaten, you better be damn ready to follow through.
That's it. Absolutely.
So,
No empty threats.
So first student came, as the late Vincent A. Buddy Cianci would say, came Coco.
Yep.
What do you think finally tipped them to do it?
To be honest with you, there was the mayor had put out a deadline for the parties to get together, and there was 3 RFPs that went out. One of them I didn't understand at all, which was, I guess, supposed to put pressure on us, where they would hire a company that had 200 bus drivers that apparently had school bus endorsements and were ready to go to replace us, which doesn't exist.
Right.
But the RFP for the actual work, there's a lot of companies out there. There's Durham, there's DATCO, there's Ocean State Transit, SDA. There's a few of them that can bid on that work and potentially take it away from First Student. Now, First Student was the only one that bid on the contract last time, so I guess they were kind of relying on that. But these companies were showing up to these meetings where they were announcing this, and they were there. First Student saw them, and I think it put the pressure on them to get something done quick. And we did. We got it done before the mayor's deadline. So I'll give him credit for that. We definitely got it done before his deadline, and I think that might have been the pressure they needed. We were putting pressure on them the entire time.
So now what? So let's kind of morph and let's kind of morph then into where we are now.
Yep.
And you've got a settled contract now. Your folks voted on it, approved it.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an approved contract. It's in force now, or when does it start?
Well, the city voted on it, I believe, yesterday or today. I'm not sure if they passed. I'm pretty sure they did. I can't imagine they wouldn't.
Your phone will be ringing.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. Yeah, and I would have got a phone call. But so it's effective retro to 7/1/2018.
Okay. And so let's talk about the life of a bus driver. And a lot of this is public information.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's up to you whether or not what you want to share with me as far as salary figures.
Yep.
What does an entry-level bus driver roughly make? And let's also talk about that whole bit where it's only a part-time job, because you've got a 4-hour commitment in the morning, and then you've got a 4-hour commitment later in the day.
Well, roughly.
Right.
Roughly. That's 8 hours right there, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what they're guaranteed, we have what's called guaranteed hours. So no matter how long the run takes, and this is different from every town. So if some of my Warren drivers see this, they're going to say that's not how it works here. But in Providence, because of the complexity of the city, the complexity, how hard it is to get around even in a car, never mind a bus, they have a 3-hour guarantee in the morning and a 3-hour guarantee in the PM. So their AM shift, driving the kids to school, is 3 hours, and then later in the day they'll get another 3. So they're guaranteed 6 hours a day or 30 hours a week. But where the thing with that Providence yard is there's over 150 charters that come into that yard every day. And that's extra work on top of the school bus runs and everything else.
Right.
So, that's what the drivers try to do, is they try to get the shortest run possible in the morning, get the kids to school, get that 3-hour guarantee, and then jump on, a charter where you're taking a nursing home to the beach for the day or to the park or whatever, and you're literally just waiting for them to get back on and drive away, and it's guaranteed time. So they're making a lot more than just that. They do a lot more than just the home to school.
Right. Now, and let's be blunt, what may seem to be great, you got that gap in the middle, that's actually challenging from a lifestyle perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's not like you can
Get another job.
job for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the day. It's not like it makes it easy for you as a parent.
Exactly.
So the hours are not, by definition, not supportive for a part-time mom's job or part-time husband's job. In fact, it's quite frankly, it's not unlike a lot of restaurant or fast food jobs where you're shift dependent, and you've got a minimum guarantee, but you've got no real guarantees as to how much money you'll make. So you go into this with a minimum, but it's very unclear. It's got to be kind of an unsettling kind of day because it seems like they're on the hustle.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are. And any parent knows driving around with 1 or 2 kids is never mind 70 of them.
Right, right.
So that alone is stressful and just dealing with the traffic in Rhode Island. But as far as what they're getting when they start, a new driver will get in Providence now $19 an hour to start.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what type of licensing do they have to have?
So they have to have a CDL Class B with a passenger endorsement and a school bus endorsement, which is also called a white card, which is something that nowhere else in New England that I know of does this, and they're held to a higher standard than most other CDL Class B drivers.
Right.
So if you have anything on your record at all, you can't be a school bus driver.
Right.
So it's a lifestyle for these people just to hold on to that license. You can't
Right.
You can't do anything that some people would consider fun or dangerous. So,
Right.
so-
No, you have to you're dealing with children
Yep.
in an extra legal environment, requiring licensing that could be, as we know, that can be snuffed by the state at any one moment.
Absolutely.
And how much training is involved? I mean, I know this, so this is kind of a leading question, but getting those type of endorsements in a CDL, that's not knowing how to drive.
Yeah, has nothing to do
with the what's required to work with
So
this.
you would have to, in order to get your CDL Class B, so first student is, and a lot of the bus companies realize how hard that is, so they'll take people off the street and train them.
Right.
They'll pay for the training, they'll pay them while they're training, and it takes anywhere from, so every bus driver has 2 different dates. They have their hire date, and then they have their seniority date. Their hire date is when they were hired by the company, their seniority date is when they were actually able to drive. So when they're brought in by the company, depending on where they were in that process, a lot of people come in with a CDL Class B already
Right.
and just have to get the passenger endorsement. It could be anywhere from a year to 6 months before you're ready to get on the road.
Right. So you're making at the bottom end of the pay scale.
Yep, 19 an hour.
Yeah. Right. Which is
Not bad.
not bad, but you're not going to buy a house. You're not going to. This is not a lifestyle pathway to instant riches.
No, it's not.
All right. So this is a classic case of government asking you to work at a very high level. Make sure that your lifestyle comports itself to working with children and working at this very high level. Yet at the same time, economic security is
Not really there.
no.
Yeah.
This is not a gateway to a white collar job.
No, that's why we know how valuable our bus drivers are. Being the representatives, and
Right.
the company understands how valuable they are too. They just don't want to show it.
Right.
In so many ways. So I mean, that's where we have the leverage in that negotiation. We're not asking for a lot for somebody who's not qualified for a position. They're highly qualified. They're highly skilled, and with this strike proved anything, they're irreplaceable employees. So
Yeah.
they have to, I mean, what do you pay somebody like that?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, also talk about, if you will, the responsibilities of the job.
Yeah, so I mean, you can't ever be late. So basically, what a bus driver's life is, while school is in session, they wake up at about 4 o'clock in the morning. They're at that bus yard for 5 o'clock. Whatever their run is, they have what's called a gate time.
Right.
So they have to go in. They have to do a pre-trip on the bus. They have to make sure everything's working. Make sure it passes the pre-trip. If there's a problem, they got to get another bus. Hit their gate time to get on their run. Pick up 70 different kids in 70 different, usually, right around 50 different stops along the way, which is not a direct line to the school that they're going to because of the way
Right.
we do it in Providence. So they're driving literally all around the city during rush hour, dropping kids off, and if they're not on time, there's a lot of backlash that comes from the school, that comes from parents, that comes from the community in general. They have to deal with fights on the buses. They have to deal with things that you wouldn't even think about. Like I actually just defended a driver not too long ago who had missed their stop for the student and dropped the student off at the next stop and was being reprimanded for it. And when I asked her why she did it, she said, "Well, I know the kid that I was dropping off. He's in a gang, and he's a crip. And the people that were waiting at the telephone pole where I dropped him off were all wearing red. So I knew that they were there, you know.
Yeah.
So I didn't put them in that situation. I kept going, and obviously they didn't get any discipline on it. But things like that they have to think about. They're really sharp individuals.
Right. Well, people in the suburbs, and I often find, and I'm someone from the suburbs,
Yep.
I often find that the people in the suburbs are less tolerant of some of the challenges of living in a city.
Yes.
You know, as someone who drives around a lot, who's on the road a couple nights a week late for my second job,
Yeah.
describe in a sense, their office are the streets of the West End, the South End. It ain't all driving up and down Blackstone Boulevard, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not. If this is when the weather is nice. I mean, when we had those snowstorms and not cars couldn't get through, my driver still delivered those kids to school. They were a little late, but they got there.
Right.
So there's all sorts of things that are unforeseen. Just that you realize just driving around in the city, like, oh, this road's closed now. How do I get from here to there without that road?
Right.
You got to figure that out on the fly. And that's what a lot of my drivers are up against. They have to obey the speed limit because not only are they being watched on GPS,
Right.
but if anybody sees a school bus speeding, then
Oh.
500 calls come in.
Right.
So they're constantly obeying. They have to be the perfect drivers on a daily basis with all the things that frustrate you and cause road rage and cause you to scream and yell in your car. You got to remain calm and continue to do your job. And I'll tell you right now, I could not do that as a resident of Rhode Island. So.
Right, and the drivers too are the first line to medical emergencies.
No, that's it. Absolutely, yeah. They're CPR trained. They have the Narcan. They have the EpiPens.
Oh my God! All these things. I mean, I'm just thinking of Narcan and EpiPens.
Yeah, that's the reality we live in right now. Yep. So
They are, and again, and I just want to stress, it's zero tolerance. A kid falls asleep in the back of a bus when you lock down for the night.
I get it. Yeah.
All right.
That's the worst case now.
A kid gets beat up in the back of a bus in a tough, and I'm not here to marginalize the youth of Providence, but there are some tough neighborhoods.
Oh, there's really tough neighborhoods.
And there's tough realities, and they don't magically end when you get into the bus.
No, they don't. Unfortunately, it would be nice, but
Right. And as a result, not only are some of these students in danger, I'm sure each bus driver's had that moment where they're wondering, okay, what's going to happen to me?
yeah. No, I've heard plenty of stories of bus drivers getting punched, spit on, things thrown at them. One was attacked with a bat. I mean, it's a dangerous job when you're taking some of the inner city kids, and I don't want to marginalize them either, but I mean they grow up in rough areas,
Right.
and that's what they know. That's how they survive. So they don't see him as a bus driver; they see him as the opponent when there's a disagreement, or how they would see any other adversary. So
$19 an hour.
$19 an hour to start. In
Right.
5 years, we're at 28. So.
Okay. So there's clearly a path, but
Yeah.
is there a high level of attrition between starting drivers? Do they, is it when folks realize just how demanding it is?
Yep.
Do you lose a lot along the way?
We lose a lot of them to RIPTA because they say, if I'm going to get, this kind of treatment, might as well do it full time. And we lose a lot of them to RIPTA because it's the same endorsements without the school bus endorsement, though. So it's a little bit more of a lax license, but it's about the same pay, and you put up with about the same,
Right.
BS.
Right. For more money and
A little bit more money.
and a more normal lifestyle.
Yeah, for the most part.
Wow. Okay. So and is RIPTA union, by the way?
They are. They're ATU. Yeah.
Okay. The question is, I mean, at a certain point, we're fortunate to have these people.
Oh, God,
I
don't know what I do without my bus driver. I live in East Providence, but I don't know what I do if I didn't have it. That's part of my daily routine is to drop them.
you got kiddos that
Yeah.
you put into buses.
Yeah, that's it. And these are the people that you trust with your children. I mean, it's not your money we're talking about. It's not your possession. These are your children that you're handing off to this person. So, when I hear some of the stuff that people say on Facebook, I just hope they don't have kids, you know, when it comes to that stuff. But,
Well, and there, but for the grace of God.
yeah, exactly.
You know, what in terms of income potential,
Yeah.
you know, as far as the pension goes, you know, what I mean, if you're starting now and you're beginning to pay into the pension, and you're a younger person, and is there a minimum years, maximum years to retirement? How you know, what type of lifespan can a Teamster bus driver have working for whoever happens to have the contract with the city of Providence?
So, you know, if what we have right now is a company paying in 50 cents an hour core contribution into the retirement fund, and that's just the ground level. Obviously, as the years go on, we'll negotiate more money into that instead of raises, and you know, just become an economic that we negotiate. But I have some drivers that have been there 30 years, and if they got in at 50 cents an hour 30 years ago and stayed all 30 years, I don't know what that number would be, but it would be more than you would think.
Right.
It'd be quite a bit of money. It would definitely replace the Social Security that's not going to be there when I retire. I'll tell you that.
You and me both. You and me both. How important is it? Because the job is demanding this every day. You know, you get the mornings where you wake up and like, I just you know, this just isn't worth it. How important, and without going Oprah on you, if you will, how important is it to the psyche and the, you know, the stick-to-itiveness of a driver to have this type of plan in place?
Oh, it's huge for them. It really was. I mean, when they told me, you know, these drivers in Providence have been unionized for a long time. They understand what it means to make the union work for them. And they told me what they wanted. That pension was number one. And I got them everything except for the pension. And we went back and voted it, and they voted it down. 78 no, 2 yes. We got the pension. It came back 100 yes and 1 abstain. So that was what they wanted. That was their end-all, be-all for these negotiations. And they weren't going to stop until they got it.
Right. It's interesting. A union organizer I know actually said to me once when she was talking about these situations where you run into people who typically aren't in unions, some of them who could use unions, rather than focus on trying to take away from other people, why don't you go out and...
That's it, yep. Well, there's a lot of things that we do for the that affect all bus drivers, whether they're union or not. Like, we got a law changed where during the summertime they do go on unemployment because there's no work. And they're technically laid off, so they collect unemployment. What they would have to do was they would have to put their resume up, they would have to apply for jobs, and some people would get a call back on the jobs, and they take them. So now we got one less bus driver coming back, you know, and that's what really created that shortage. So what we did was we extended that period to I believe it was 12 weeks, so that bus drivers in particular don't have to put the resume up, and we can get more retention coming back. So that way kids aren't waiting for a bus that doesn't come. That affected all bus drivers. The sick time law that we helped fight for, I'm not going to take full credit for it, but the Teamsters were 100% behind that for our bus drivers who are part-time, that never can take a day off, but yet they're dealing with a petri dish of children every day. They're getting sick constantly, having to come to work sick. That was huge for them as well. That was a fight that we won. So the ones that don't have it, they know the difference. They know that in Providence they're paying 90% of their health care. They're paying, you know, a lot more money, and they're getting a lot more benefits. And I guess they envy them. I don't know.
One of the urban legends is that someone can't get fired.
Yeah.
Talk about, you know, talk about, first of all, how empowering it is to have a formalized grievance process.
Yeah.
When you're a staff employee for a multinational company that is, like all companies have the right to be, hard driving, challenged to, you know, literally grab every shekel out of it. You know, that's their responsibility to investors to maximize. Right? Employees need to be able to have a mechanism to which they can survive against that relentless attempt to maximize. Talk about the grievance process. What does it really cover, and how important is it to workers?
Yeah, so I mean, the grievance procedure, and there is that perception out there that the unions only protect the lazy guys. That's not true at all. What we do is we give the bad employees a chance to change. There's 3 strike and you're out, progressive discipline. You know, you get the verbal warning, the written warning.
Well, tell you, I don't think a lot of people understand that
Okay.
because I think they just assume that it's a free ride.
Yeah.
You know, you can have, you know, you've got these horror stories in New York City school systems where, you know, people are sent to the rubber rooms where they're on suspension, they're getting paid, and for the next 10 years,
Yeah.
the reality is much more likely, say, with UPS, where my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that for years there was a no tolerance policy on accidents, on at-fault accidents, or that's Federal
Yes.
Express, or UPS as well.
Well, yeah, you would definitely be disciplined at some point. I don't know about. It depends on the severity of the accident.
Right.
I don't cover UPS, but from what I understand, the severity of the accident, the reason for the accident, you know, would all matter. If you're on your phone or something like that, obviously you would be fired immediately. But there are terminal offenses. There are cardinal sins that, yeah, you're not coming back from. You punch somebody, you fight somebody, you're not coming back. You steal something, you're fired. There's not even a grievance procedure for that. That's an egregious act. Unless, you know, we can prove that you didn't do it and you were accused of it. That's where the grievance procedure really helps people out, are the people that are accused of something and then, you know, it ends up being something else.
Right.
That's where it's huge, and that's where I come in. I do an investigation into whatever they're being charged with, and if I find that, you know, the evidence is in my member's favor, I'll argue it. I'm basically, you know, their job attorney, even though I'm not an attorney. That's what I do, and it's helped out a lot more people that are great, hard-working employees that were on the wrong end of, you know, a bad deal or the wrong end of what looked like something that it wasn't.
Right.
And we were able to work it out. I can give you a perfect example of that with one of my drivers in Providence, my bus drivers. There was a picture that went viral of one of them sticking up the middle finger from behind the bus. They were in the bus and they stuck up the middle finger. The driver was fired immediately. Well, I met with the driver and I said, what happened? And she said that there was someone that was, and there ended up becoming a video to back this up. Somebody who was screaming, yelling racial slurs at her like crazy, and, you know, just almost provoking her to try to get out of the bus, and all she did was turn around, give her the finger, and keep going. And that was, you know, when we had the video of what this woman was saying to her and how vicious it was, we ended up saying, okay, well, if all you did was slip her off, that's good, because most people would have got out and confronted them. So there's one instance where the grievance procedure works for a member.
Right. So you know, because I'm not sure if most people understand what it really means to be an at-will employee. If you're an at-will employee in Rhode Island,
The color of your hat, you're out of here.
yeah, no questions,
Yep.
no responsibility.
Boss a Yankee fan, you coming in a Red Sox jersey, see you later, buddy.
Yeah.
That's easy.
And-
And they'll win in court, too.
Right, and there's no accountability for severance time. There's really no protection whatsoever
No.
for people who invest years of their life. Just
That's it. It can turn on a dime. And that's really that's another thing that we do is, you know, right now, I've always said that the best anti-union policy in the world for all the business owners out there, treat your employees right. They organize for a reason. They feel they're not being treated right. They're not being, you know, they're not being compensated, not being listened to a lot of times. A lot of times it's, you know, there's a lot of turnover in management and they're scared. Right now we got a great boss, but, you know, he could get a better job somewhere else, and now we got a tyrant in here.
Right.
We want to be protected through all those periods. And that's really what labor unions do, is protect we like to call the middle class, what's left of it, and make sure that they can keep coming to work and keep providing for their families, and that they get a fair shake.
what are your thoughts now? Obviously, there's been some court cases lately where you know, you no longer have to be a member of the union to eventually benefit from being a member of the union, but not benefit. How have the Teamsters reacted to that?
So that only applies to the public sector, the Janus decision.
Right.
The private sector is different because, like, you know, the employer is not the government. It's a private entity. So the way that we haven't had many people up down, I can't imagine that many people have throughout the country, because if there has ever been a volatile work environment, it's municipal politics.
Right.
Where, you know, you're not going to have the same city manager from one step to the next, no matter how great he's doing, with the internal struggles going on. The councilors are going to change. All the people that you think are your friend aren't going to be there next time. So if there's anywhere that you need protection, it is in municipal politics, and state and federal, for that matter, as well, because of all the turnover. And, you know, if you want to go into an at-will employment kind of place, then that's on you. But it always benefits to be a member of the union in the government.
What right now, what type of health benefits do Teamster bus drivers get in
So
Providence?
they get a Cadillac plan from the Teamsters. It's administered out of local 633 in New Hampshire. It's a Legion Care is what it's called, but it's zero deductible, fully. You would call it a Cadillac plan of healthcare, and the company currently is paying 80% of that plan, and my drivers are paying 20. That is the only place that I know of in the country where that rate is there. But that happened because back in 2000, the same group of people stood up and they struck the company in 2000 for that healthcare, and they were the ones that got it.
So at this point in time, the doors are open. And there is First Union hiring?
Yeah, well, they're always hiring, absolutely.
All right.
Not always in Providence, but they're hiring.
All right. So what you've managed to do, from your perspective, is to create it's always going to be a demanding job.
Absolutely.
No one's ever going to get quote unquote rich from it, but they'll be able to have a fair life and retire, be afforded the protection of representation at the workplace, and not be literally at the end of someone else's nervous breakdown. Well, and again, this is. I was once one of my first jobs as a teenager was being the only non-union guy in a union sheet metal factory.
Oof.
And a lot of the guys there were paid on piecework. And I can't tell you how many times a foreman, who reminds me still to this day of Squiggy, would be storming up. He'd be marching this way. All of a sudden, the shop steward would catch, because shop stewards, I think you guys have another sense. There's like this, you have your spidey sense.
Well,
You just, ding, shop steward passes along this way. The employee who's on the subject of the controversy is here. All of a sudden, he sees the steward. He turns around and starts yelling at me. Because
because you're not union.
Because he could. And the shop steward would look at me and go, and the guy would be like, he'd be making faces behind the foreman. But that's literally the reality is if you're out there on your own.
It is the reality, and it's a lot of people say that people get disciplined at work. What we like to say in the labor unions, myself as a business agent anyway, is that it's a corrective action. Okay, there's a problem with this employee. We both sides recognize it. Now we got to correct that problem. We're going to issue discipline at this level to correct the issue. And if it continues, then that discipline keeps going. And eventually, if you keep doing the same thing, if you keep being that lazy guy that everybody thinks the union protects, you're going to be gone. You're going to get a chance to change with us. But if you're not up to snuff and you're not with the rest of your brothers and sisters in the workplace, you're going to be gone eventually. It just gives you that chance to change because everybody goes through hard times. You might be nobody knows what's going on at home. People go through rough patches and they usually bounce back from them and they're stronger than they were when they got into them. So we try to help people through that, and any mistakes they might make. I mean, we are human. It shouldn't cost you your ability to provide for your family.
For folks who are struggling with issues who are union members, but many of the unions provide.
Oh yeah, we have an EAP. Yep, an employee assistance program. We have. I mean, I am as much a psychologist as I am a representative. I talk with guys all the time. I hear everything and. I'm always somebody to yell at when they need to yell. I'm always somebody there to listen to their problems, and they know that it's going to be held confidential, and I'll get people all the help I can get through any means possible.
And that's run through the Teamsters Union?
That's through us, yeah. That's part of just being a member. That's being part of a brotherhood. We look out for our own. It says right on the side of our truck, people helping people, and that's what we do. With just a few minutes left, and by the way, thank you so much for coming in tonight on Friday night. I really appreciate the opportunity because I think we've really set a lot of urban myths and legends. Yeah, no doubt. One of them is that a libertarian that's pro-labor. I thought I was the only one.
No, it's and it's funny because I have this conversation all the time. I will tell you the one thing that I do to tweak certain people is I'll listen to someone, and again, my father's 95, God bless him, double Purple Heart winner. He's been retired now for a while, and he gets a check. And by the way, he's living at an assisted living facility, and the check, just if you're out listening out there in coalition land, his union pension check, he's at the lowest levels of assisted living. He's very independent, but it covers his nut.
Yeah, that's it.
He gets a check every month, and he lives somewhat worry-free. He has to worry more about the storms down in Florida watching the Weather Channel too damn much than he does anything, right? Anything else. Think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. So, you know, it's. I love to torture yuppies. It's just a thing I do. And so, you know, I'll hear one of them ranting and raving about the unions, and they typically have a white collar job. And I'm like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm an engineer. I'm pretty good. Where'd you go to school? Northeastern, you know, fill in the blanks. MIT. Wow, that's pretty cool. Those are expensive schools. Well, yeah. I said, your parents help you out? Well, yeah, my dad did. What'd your dad do? I was a pipe fitter. Oh, he was in the union, wasn't he? Yeah. What are the odds of you having been able to afford that college?
Exactly.
Right? If your dad hadn't had some type of representation. I think, in the words of the immortal Dean Wormer, 0.0.
Correct, sir.
You know, I know that people can argue about the issue, but I think they need to step back and gain some perspective on where their place in the marketplace is and how insignificant they can be if they don't aggregate. Now, you can call that some people, that's communism. All right, well then again, who just bought who last week in the corporate world?
Well, that's true too.
Right, so
a lot of people feel they're irreplaceable at work. Nobody could do what I do. Well, the reality is, if you died tomorrow, you know, your job would be online before your obituary.
Yeah,
that's the truth. You know?
Right.
So,
And that person will make less money.
That's it.
And
they do the same thing, and then the company'd still survive, and you'd be long gone, and they wouldn't remember you.
No, my day job, I'm a salesman, so salesmen are allowed to retire with the companies because as long as you sell, as long as you make your number.
That's it. Yeah.
Right. But the world is filled with 55-year-old right-sized engineers, 55-year-old right-sized accountants, 55-year-old right-sized computer programmers who simply were either too expensive or couldn't keep up with newer technology. And the problem is that at that point in time, they don't have a lot of options.
No, I know. That's it. That's what you train for. That's what you do.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, if you're not negotiating as a group, guess what? No one's coming to help you. Now, unions, there's a lot of agreement, disagreement about, you know, union clout in the state, whether or not unions are increasing, decreasing. How are the Teamsters doing in Rhode Island? Are you actively organizing?
Oh yeah, we have an amazing organizer. His name's Mike Simone, and you know the calls come in all the time, just based on friends of friends. They have friends working for a Teamster place and talking to a friend who's non-union, and my boss did this, my boss did. Well, you need to call it. You shouldn't have to put up with that, and that's how we get a lot of our members organized. And it's something that we'll continue to do, and we feel like we're the best hope that the middle class in this country has to maintain some kind of presence. So we're going to keep fighting, we're going to keep doing our thing, and we're going to keep growing. That's basically where we're at.
My mom was a nurse for 40 plus years before she retired and then passed.
Amazing
and the arguments we used to have over the dinner table, because my father was unionized, and really it's only in most recent years that most nurses were unionized. Now, when my mom retired, she had bursitis, she had back issues, just from the sheer physicality of being a nurse, particularly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where there were really no protections, nothing afforded.
No electronics to help you.
No, I mean, you were pretty much on your own.
Yeah.
And my father saw this happening, and just said, you know what? You're not walking away from your attachment to the patients by simply getting together with other individuals and negotiating a better standard of living.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I actually, I was elected into my position from Rhode Island Hospital. I worked in the pediatric intensive care unit for 7 years as a unit assistant. I would basically assist the nurses with whatever they needed. And they're some of the most amazing people that I've ever met. They're more important to those patients than the doctors, 100%.
They are the duct tape that's holding together the entire medical system. So when you look at what's going on with Rhode Island Hospital, and the constant pressure put on nurses in terms of shift, mandatory overtime.
What drives me the most crazy about that whole thing with Rhode Island Hospital is they're a not-for-profit entity. They're not a corporate giant, but they are. And I never understood how they got away with that status. And they act like a corporate entity. They They treat their employees like a corporate entity would, and they're able to get away with it because they're a not-for-profit.
Right. And you've got, listen, ultimately, and I'm confused by that as well.
Yeah.
If it's a for-profit corporation and the CEO is making $1 bazillion, well, that's how it goes.
Yep.
But at the same time, when, as an industry, you routinely just, for lack of a better term, beat the hell out of your employees. I mean, nursing, it's a nursing, and actually even down, when I say down the food chain, I mean just in terms of the technicality of the job, home health aides,
Oh, yeah.
nursing home aides. These are people who
CNAs, absolutely. Yep.
just work brutal conditions, brutal hours. You know, of course, in the free market sense, if you don't like the job, quit it.
Yeah.
Well, but you know, that's ignoring reality.
Yeah.
If these people can organize,
loving what you do and loving who you work for.
right?
You know, there's a difference there, and I think those nurses are in that category where they love what they do, but they have a problem with who they work for.
And the conditions are made to work under.
Exactly. Yep. And I saw that every single day of my life when I worked there.
Yeah, no, and so something, and I'm, you know, it's a challenge because, you know, there's so much happens in this little place we call Rhode Island, that it's a challenge, quite frankly, to keep up with all of it, even if people like you and I are paying attention. But you know, we still have that unresolved. Really, what's happening with nurses in home, and, you know, the entire professional medical staff at hospitals. That's a situation we have yet to resolve here in the state.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, no, and something's got to give eventually. I mean, we can't just keep going down the road pretending nothing's wrong. You know, they gotta wake up. They gotta come to the table, and they gotta realize that without those nurses, that hospital does not run. You can't pay, you know, $1.5 million to some company out of Missouri to run your hospital every single day. You can't do it. You need these people. So hopefully, you know, they wake up and realize it's not all about the profits.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on, Nick Levitz. He is the first of all, you represent the busing employees. Do you represent any other groups? Do you focus entirely on the?
No, the bus drivers are one. I have 27 different assignments. So these bus drivers in Providence are one of those 27. I also have mostly all the public sector that the Teamsters do. I have the Providence Housing Authority. I have the Pawtucket Housing Authority, a couple other housing authorities, and then the DPW out in Situate, the DPW down in Tiverton, out in Fall River, which is getting interesting in that town. But just about all the public sector that we do, I represent.
The Reeve will always be interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
it will.
Well, as Jaisal, who rhymes with Basil, would tell you, he didn't take $1 as
anything
mayor.
wrong. He didn't do anything.
That may be the single greatest politically parsed.
My favorite part was when he gave his entire defense in a press conference. If his lawyers must have been home slapping themselves in the head, like, what are you doing? You're locking yourself into a story before the trial.
But that's the Reeve.
Yeah, hey, what are you gonna do? I've learned not to be shocked by anything out there anymore. So that's it. But
Well, again, thank you for coming in. How can folks find out about your union, and if they want to reach out and quietly have a quiet conversation, who do they reach out to?
Absolutely. So you'd want to call 401-434-0454 and listen for Mike Simone's extension. He's our organizer. He's been doing this for longer than I've been alive, believe it or not, and he knows the ins and outs. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to keep it, on the down low, and until it needs to be brought to the employer's attention. So there's no harm in reaching out. It's worth a shot if you feel like you're getting a bad deal and you feel like you're.
And that's a legally protected conversation.
It is, absolutely. So as soon as you reach out to us, you're covered under the National Labor Relations Act, which gives you a right to what's called protected concerted activity.
Right.
As long as you're not calling while you're on the clock at work,
right.
You can have that conversation, and the employer can't retaliate against you. If they were, then our lawyers would come in, and they don't.
No, and everybody knows the rules at this point. And
You'd be surprised.
Well, but the final thought is ultimately, if you don't want a union, do the right thing by your employees.
That's
and
it.
very often,
I've said it a million times. The best anti-union policy in the world is treat your employees right. That's it.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on your settlement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And if you have a chance, wish well to your employees from our little effort here, and tell them that even though I might be one of those highly strung drivers in Providence in the morning, if you see the guy in the little Nissan Sentra with the mask, just
Leave them alone.
Leave 'em-
I got you. All
I really
I'll
mean
put
well.
the word out there. All right.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break now. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. This broadcast will be shared instantly after we leave the show tonight, and you have a chance to revisit, I think, which was a compelling conversation analyzing the realities, not the Sturm und Drang, not the noise, not the political spin, not the urban legends that are spread about drivers and life as a union member. But I think the primary value of tonight's conversation was to reflect on what it's like to be on the other side and actually work as a bus driver here in Providence, the pressures, the challenges, the financial issues, and realize that the folks driving these buses have a difficult job. They have to be highly qualified. There is zero tolerance for failure, and quite frankly, the regular folks like us who want nothing other than what we want, which is to have a quality of life. And to that, we owe them our respect, our gratitude for keeping our children safe, because quite frankly, they have an exemplary record here in Providence, and I'm glad things worked out. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, and this week filled with nonsense. We are nonsense free. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. CoalitionRadio.us, where we will not be discussing who stole whose books and who was crushing on whose boyfriend in junior high school this week. Sorry to disappoint. But joining me on the line is a longtime friend. He's a candidate for the Rhode Island State Senate. He's running as a Republican for District 27, a significant part of Cranston. His name is Jonathan Keith. Jonathan, welcome to the Coalition.
Hey, Pat, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, we're just a couple of weeks out. How many doors have you knocked on in the last few weeks?
Last few weeks, I've probably knocked on about 2,500, 3,000 doors.
Oh, geez. I'm thinking, one of these reality shows, or better yet, one of these weight loss programs. We'll call it the candidates weight loss program. Are you?
Weight loss, definitely. I've lost 35 pounds this election.
Are you in fighting shape now?
My wife actually recognized me again after 10 years.
Excellent. Talk to us about your district, your Senate district. Now, again, and one of the challenges, by the way, folks, if you're tuning in or following candidates for the first time, Rhode Island's got a long tradition of door-to-door, hand-to-hand, face-to-face contact. And in a senatorial district, it's huge. You're talking about thousands of people. It's a much smaller community, if you will, up in Halitosis Hall. Tell us about District 27, what it's comprised of, some of the challenges, some of the economics. Give us a little bit of a background.
So District 27 is the heartland of Cranston. I mean, it goes right through the middle, and it actually in the north end, it goes out a little bit towards West Warwick. It's one of those areas where you're not from Cranston, you're from a specific area in Cranston. So you're from Mashantucket Lake, you're from Garden City, you're from Dean Estates, you're from Glen Hills. You're not, so it's real small, community tight niched, feel inside of the second largest city in the land. So I absolutely love walking from area to area and hearing the different things that are going on in this area, which is completely different from that area. The compilement of individuals in each place are unique to that area and that neighborhood. And it's fantastic going out and meeting these people.
So you've got a real mix. In your district, you've got what, retail, you've got state buildings, you've got manufacturing, and you've got residential, right?
Oh yeah, a little bit of manufacturing, not too much manufacturing, but a lot more retail. A lot of residential.
What are the concerns? And this has been our theme for the last few weeks as we've had candidates on. What are your concerns about, or I should say, what are your constituents' concerns about what's going on here in Rhode Island? I mean, first of all, are people optimistic? Are they frustrated? Are they angry? And what are they really? Forget about all the nonsense that's played out over the media about, again, all this childish crap. What are they concerned about? What are they upset about? What are they worried about?
Well, the biggest thing they talk about is education. And every door I go to, that's the number one issue, is that our schools are crumbling, that children are freezing in one classroom and sweating in another. The materials aren't provided to the teachers. To the students, the parents have to bring in supplies for the students, to actually clean the tables. I mean, it's ridiculous. The sanitary waste and everything like that we have to bring in. Paper, you name it. The list that we're asked to do as parents in this area is something that really shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And that's across the whole state. That's not just Cranston at all. It has no reflection on the city. It's just the fact that we are not funding our education the way that we should be in the state of Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And that's something that parents really have an issue with. The other thing, too, is it's the car tax still. I mean, I can't tell you how many people bring up the car tax. It's a serious problem, especially with people who lease. I mean, you're leasing a vehicle and you're paying tax on the full amount of the vehicle. You didn't buy the vehicle. You're leasing a portion of it.
Right. And that's the sheer cost of owning a vehicle in this state is just off the chart. You've got an incredible failure here because, quite frankly, mass transportation, we spend enormous amounts of money in the state, and it's failing. It's failing its target audience, which is sometimes the poorest, the most marginalized amongst us, who are doing a lot of difficult jobs. And then, you know, you flash forward to those people who are fortunate enough and they've worked hard, they own a vehicle, they're just getting dragged over the coals at this point. We are one of the most expensive states in the nation to own a vehicle, between insurance and the variety of stealth taxes that occur. All of this is numbing after a while. Are people defeatist at this point, or do you think that at this point they're finally mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore?
Well, from the reaction in comparison to the last time I ran 2 years ago, it is night and day. People have had it. They're fed up. They've said anyone but who we have in office. We're tired of the same old lies that we're being told. It's time for change. Rhode Island needs it. We deserve it. We deserve better than what we have. I mean, it's every corner, too. It's not just certain neighborhoods that feel that way. Every single person I've talked to. You know, how long has your opponent been in office? 20 years. Nope, done. You're in. You got my vote.
There's been no real change.
Right?
So let's go down the laundry list of issues. First of all, an issue that you're connected with peripherally is, of course, what exploded this week with the situation with the gentleman, and I'll use the term loosely, who's living in Washington Park area, Providence. A sexual offender. You had actually worked in the background with Representative Lancia to champion legislation that would have, I believe, addressed a lot of those issues, and you did that as a patriot, as a citizen volunteer. You know, Harrington Hall, and also not only advocating for just limitations, but also for support services for folks who found themselves in the situation of being a level 1, 2, or 3 offender. What happened there, and what happened to that legislation?
Well, it's kind of funny. I actually spent a half an hour at one person's door talking about this very issue tonight. I went to 105 doors today. I walked 6 miles, and the third to last door I went to, this woman was mad as hell about the issue, and she said, we need somebody in there to do something about, you know, the Howard complex in Harrington Hall. And I mean, what happened was simply that there was a piece of legislation that was put in, and the legislation was surrounded by any facility that was on state property or receiving state funds to be limited to 10% of available beds that could be taken by sex offenders. And that was the original legislation. After it stalled in the House, there were some community forums that came up that Representative Lancia put together, and Speaker Mattiello came to the first one, and he said that he was going to have his lawyers assist in pushing this legislation through, and that we were going to give the state 6 months to react and come up with a plan how to implement this change in the state. It passed the House, it went over to the Senate, and it stalled in the Senate. It sat in the Senate for a good 2 months before we completely inundated District 27, pushing Hannah Gallo to try to move the bill forward. The bill was then perverted from Lancia's original intent, and it became more of just a targeted homeless shelter instead of any facility that was receiving state funds.
Right.
And when that happened, the ACLU had proper grounds to press charges and actually, you know, push against this, because it was an infringement upon everyone's right that is homeless. And so the ACLU actually put a suit against the state of Rhode Island, and that legislation was deemed useless. So all the effort in last session was completely null and void because of somebody's attempt to, I don't know, give it to, or change the legislation however they saw fit. I have no idea why they didn't push it through the way it was, or why they didn't bring the people in to sit down and have a conversation and talk about what the intent was and what the best solution may be, without just ramming through a piece of legislation and then having the fallout come back on them.
Right, because it was, in my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, an important part of Representative Lancia's vision was to not just address a concentration of folks who are sexual offenders, but also to simultaneously address the needs of that community to limit recidivism, to promote some type of healing and treatment. I mean, the original vision was really to be a comprehensive approach to a pervasive problem, which is, folks who are guilty of these crimes are often put into one concentrated area because of homeless shelters, because communities it's so difficult for them to find housing. Those neighborhoods obviously are concerned about safety issues. It's a very personal, very emotional issue. So I'm not challenging their concerns whatsoever, but at the same time, we just simply can't cast these people into the streets. And there has to be an approach towards recovery at some level, or at least containment. And that was really the intent of the legislation before it got perverted, correct?
Well, and that's the problem, though. So they are cast into the streets every single day from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. They are kicked out of the Harrington Hall, and they are sent on their merry way, and they go wherever they go. And they've been seen hanging around the library. They've been seen hanging around parks. They've been seen hanging around school grounds. They've actually followed children home from school in Garden City area and in Daniel Waterman. When we had those open forums, those public forums, we heard so many stories that were so disturbing it wasn't funny. And that's why this is a serious issue. And it's not a matter of if, it's when. And that's where the state needs to be proactive instead of reactive. Because if something, God forbid, ever happened, we'd sit here and say, why didn't anyone do anything?
Right.
Well, people have been trying. And every single time we try, we hit a brick wall because politics comes into play, and they want to politicize a serious issue to push forward their agenda instead of doing what's right for the constituents of their district and the people of Rhode Island.
And that's really a microcosm of everything wrong with the state government, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, ultimately, what are your hit list of issues that you want to focus on, in above and beyond this one particular issue, and use that same approach. Apply your logic, your thoughtfulness, your reasoning to each of these issues. What are you focused on as a candidate and a potential senator?
I mean, we have two 800-pound gorillas in the room. We haven't fixed our bridges in 50 years. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We're facing a $10 billion budget this session. We can't fix our roads and bridges? Our schools are falling apart. Our children aren't being properly educated. We can't fix it? $10 billion with 1 million people? We can't fix this? There's no excuse I'll accept as to why that's happening. None. Why are we paying taxes at every turn more than anyone in the area? We should be cutting our sales tax, helping the people most in need directly. Every time they buy something, they save. Because right now, 7 or 8%, you go out to a restaurant, 8%. You go down the street, you buy something, 7%. That's hurting the people who are most in need of help. It's hurting them more than people who aren't.
Right. The very tax structure
you
that
help the people in need, you cut the sales tax.
you'd have instant overnight success as a result. I know the Center for Freedom and Prosperity advocated a reduction or elimination of the sales tax just a couple of years ago when there was a comprehensive tax study done. I always talk about it. You break glass, add water, cut the sales tax dramatically, watch job creation explode, watch the retail sector rebound here in the state, and everybody's happy because, as you pointed out, it is the most regressive tax in general. I mean, it's just.
And if I'm not mistaken, that report, the reason why I picked the one was because it was the biggest return on the investment.
Right.
And I went with a 3% tax plan. So the 3% tax plan, if I'm not mistaken, off my memory, it was going to cost the state about $300 million in revenue today. But it was going to create 14,000 jobs and actually bring in $270 million in additional revenue because the money now is freed up in the local economy. Mm-hmm. So people who have money are going to spend more, which increases the revenue. And the people that have jobs now, as a result, are going to pay income tax, which increases the revenue. So what you're doing is you're broadening the base of revenue.
Right. And yet we don't somehow are incapable of summoning the political will to do that. Why do you think that is? Is it just laziness? Is it just adhering to a political mantra? Why can't we make that fix here?
So taking government out of it, I mean, in the private sector, at every company I've ever worked at, whenever we're faced with an issue or a question is raised, it's the normal response is, well, that's how we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that plays a part in government as well. I think a lot of these legislators that have been up there 20, 30, 40 years,
Right.
well, that's how we've always done it. And they don't want to change because human behavior is resistant to change. That's how we are. In our DNA, we are coded to resist change at every chance we get.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at things like that, I think it's not even a governmental failure. I think it's a human failure. And so you need somebody with a fresh perspective and new ideas to go in there that will buck the system and won't just say, well, that's how we've always done it.
Right.
Because that's not how they've done it. It's a fresh perspective for a reason.
Where did you stand on the stadium? John? Did we lose?
I'm sorry, you cut out there. What was that?
Where did you stand on the stadium subsidies?
Oh, I'm firmly against all corporate welfare. I don't think that we should be gambling with taxpayer dollars on what company is going to win and what company is going to lose. You know, you look at the convention center, which is the perfect example of a moral obligation bond deal gone bad. That's cost us almost $1 billion in tax revenue. Almost $1 billion to keep a building open that does what, 12, 15 programs a year and generates $0. It costs us $30 million every single year to keep that place open. And Providence Place Mall, another perfect example. You've got this moral obligation bond to build that facility. Providence hasn't received one tax dollar that I know of from that. And now you've got a huge anchor store leaving. I mean, this is the problem. We continue to do the same thing over. Rhode Island is the definition of insanity. We continue to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And then we wonder why it failed this time.
Right. How would you approach the Commerce Corporation, aka the Economic Development Corporation, you know, as a sitting Rhode Island state senator?
Why do they exist?
Okay.
You can't rely on the free market to do what it's supposed to do, and you can't lower the business taxes to organically grow business and attract them to your state. You need an organizational board to sit down and try to come up with ways to incentivize businesses to try to attract them to a state that they don't want to be in. I mean, that's a failure of government.
Would it surprise you to hear that, and here in the coalition we call it the Pawtucket Paw Sox Participation Trophies, that an existing travel agency in the city of Pawtucket received a $1 million grant for quote-unquote job creation? Would that surprise you?
In Rhode Island, no. It's sad, though. You know, we shouldn't be doing things like that. And there are a number of small businesses and small business owners that would love to receive $1 million to expand and build and create jobs. But it's on them to do it, not on the government to give money to do it.
Right. Do you think the government understands, or our current governor, Jenner, understands that if you give someone money, that you had to take it away from someone else? I think that seems to have, she seems to have missed that formula. Roadworks, 610 connector, tolls. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, Roadworks is just a campaign, campaign slogan. I mean, that's all that was created for. So she could put her name on every single sign and say that she's doing something and help boost her name recognition in the state. And look what she's actually accomplishing something. Mm-hmm. The 610, unfortunately, should have been done years ago. The traffic has increased in that area dramatically. I used to use it all the time when I lived in Providence, to travel down to North Kingstown. And, I mean, it was a great little shortcut there. You hit 95 South, and then you sat in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. But it's falling apart. I mean, it's being held up by Lincoln logs. I mean, it's a joke. And it's one of the highly, populated highways in our city. I mean, this is something that's seriously wrong and should be fixed. The overpasses are, I think, last year were deemed unsafe to travel on by trucks, if I'm not mistaken. And I think even the whole 610 connector is not allowing trucks to travel on it, if I'm not mistaken. I know there was some talk about that as far as, well, why do they all of a sudden wait now to tell us we can go on it? And the tolling, again, because of our neglect to fix the problems in the bridges and roads for the last 50 years, we're going to target one industry and tax them on it. It's not their fault that we couldn't do what we were supposed to do as a governmental body. And I think that what it does is it actually passes the tax rate on to the people who are purchasing the products. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. It is an indirect tax. Every time the government takes money from anyone, it's either a direct or an indirect tax.
Right.
And this is an indirect tax across the entire state for every single thing that we purchase.
With regard to the economy, besides cutting the sales tax, what else do you prescribe doing at this point? I mean, do we need comprehensive tax reform? Do we, where do we go from here? I mean, I believe our numbers are being artificially floated by the sheer amount of Rhode Islanders who work in Massachusetts, like myself. It just seems like it's just so, between the pension funds, between out of control real estate and commercial real estate taxes. I mean, what's the first step? Where do we go after? How do we dig out of this?
Well, I think one of the things that I've heard when I talk to business owners a lot in Rhode Island is that we have a lot of red tape and a lot of regulations that they have to abide by in this state that they don't have to abide by in states like Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. So a restaurant that I had a fundraiser at, I spoke to the owner, and the owner owns restaurants in Massachusetts, and his parents live in Rhode Island, so he wanted to open a restaurant here. He said it was about 5 to 10 times harder to open a restaurant in Rhode Island than it was in Massachusetts. And I think that's why you're seeing more businesses go to Massachusetts, and thus the workforce following, instead of opening here in Rhode Island. Our regulations in this state that are many times, as far as I know, are unnecessary, need to be reviewed and potentially cut. Mm-hmm. And that will also lessen the amount of money that a company or a business owner or an investor needs to put in to open a company or expand an operation. And those are the things that we need to also look at instead of just cutting the sales tax that can spur economic development. But again, it has to be organic. The government can't go in there and force an economy to grow. We've got to create the environment in which an economy can grow and prosper.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. We've got so many crises on our hands. What would you recommend doing about UHIP?
I mean, when we change programs, I work in engineering as a profession, and when we change programs, if the program that we change to fails, then we go back to the old program, or we go to a paper-based until we can fix the flaws in the new program. That's just what we do. So I think that would apply here. If you can't go back to the old system because you're too far into the implementation of the new system, then you've got to go to a forced manual paper-based system to process these individuals that need the help. Because ultimately it's a service to help the people that are in need in this state.
Should the state of Rhode Island, and when you look at our IT failures, should the state of Rhode Island ever again be in the business of developing proprietary computer systems at any level?
Well, I don't believe they developed it. I believe they hired an organization that has had a history of failure to develop it for them.
Right, but under their control.
$650 million.
Mm-hmm. But it could be said, shouldn't the state be going out to IT providers and essentially using their services on a transactional basis as opposed to attempting to own and subsidize, if not outright, pay for the cost of this development? I mean, should the state at all at this point, I mean, given the recurring nightmares at DMV, the recurring nightmares at UHIP, should Rhode Island ever get in the business again, whether it's paying someone else or doing it themselves, God forbid, of developing proprietary code. I mean, should we just walk away from that? Can we all agree that it just the idea didn't work? It's never going to work.
Well, yes and no. I wouldn't completely say that we should walk away because technology advances, and we need systems that keep up with today's technology.
Right.
However, as far as the DMV is concerned, there's a really good program out there. It's called AAA, and it works much better than the DMV. And I don't know why we just didn't hire AAA to take over the entire DMV,
right.
Branch of our existence as far as getting all the registrations and license renewals and everything like that done. If we had just sold it out to AAA, I mean, they've shown that they can do it much better than we can.
Right.
So I think that there are free market solutions that would better serve the people outside of government, but I don't think that the government should never pursue new technology to serve the people in a better way.
Right. We've only got a minute or so left. I guess my quick question would be, Jonathan Keith is elected senator. He gets his dream choice for what committee he wants to serve on. What committee would you love to serve on, given the opportunity?
Oh, it would have to be finance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what my passion is. It would have to be the finance committee.
Mm-hmm. Where is the incumbent? Where has she spent most of her time over the 20-odd years of her existence up there on Smith Hill?
She spent the majority of her time as the chairwoman of education oversight, which is laughable given the current situation with our education system in our schools. However, that's where she served. She's the chairwoman of education oversight. As far as anything else, I mean, I know she has some other limited capacities on certain committees, but that's where she has that's her passion. So if you ask her, I mean, that's where her bread and butter is. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she hasn't done anything to fix our education after serving as a chairwoman of the Educational Oversight Committee, right, is where I draw the biggest issue with her.
Right. No, absolutely. John, I appreciate you calling in tonight. I know it was a little bit of last minute. We had to do some guest juggling, which is often the case in indie media. Where can folks find out about your campaign? Where can they contribute? And most importantly, tell us again a quick synopsis of what district you're running on and how they can support you.
So I made it really easy. You go to www.johnkeithsenateri, all one word, .com, and it is a hub to every single social media connection that you possibly can, and my personal cell phone. So if you ever need to contact me, donate, you want to find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, you want to watch videos of me testifying or interviews that I've done, that's the place to go. So it's www.johnkeithsenateri.com, and that is the one location that you can find everything in. As far as the district, it's the heartland of Cranston. It's the Eden Park, the Daniel Waterman School, Garden City, Dena Estates, Glen Hill, Meshanicut Lake, Oaklawn School, a little bit out into western Cranston, up towards Phoenix Avenue, and the Natick neighborhood of West Warwick. That is the district. It goes a very large stretch, about half the city, and then one neighborhood of West Warwick.
Excellent. John Keith, he's running for District 27 for the Rhode Island State Senate. He is really, no bones about it. If you're looking for a common sense voice who's going to take a top-down approach to how we finance this state, things like zero-based budgeting, which we didn't get a chance to talk about. If you're looking for someone who's looking for equity for everyone in Rhode Island, but doing it in a logical manner without being impacted by emotions and chaos. If you're looking for someone who's got a tremendous investment in his district, he works there, he is a family man, owns a home, a lifelong investment in Rhode Island, then quite frankly, he is your candidate. If you're looking to continue the status quo, if you are happy to accept things as they are now on any issue from homelessness to the issues concerning sexual predators, to the current tax regime, if you will, that's impacting and perpetrated upon taxpayers in the state. If you think the business climate is just fine, if you're okay with all of that, then well, continue to vote for the incumbent. But if you're looking for real fundamental change, for someone who's got a tremendous investment in this state, then I think you need to take your time and consider voting for John Keith. John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
Thank you for having me.
listen, good luck in the election, and keep on walking. Okay, we want you out there in all weather. All right.
Not for you, nothing to bleed. That's the saying. That's it.
All right, run, John, run. All right. Thanks so very much. Well, folks, that brings our show to a conclusion tonight. A variety of backgrounds, a variety of philosophies, a variety of political perspectives, but they're all, as always, on the coalition, bounded together by one simple hashtag. They take it very, very personally. We're going to share this on Facebook right away, so if you missed part of it, if you wanted to talk to Lauren, if you wanted to hear from Daryl, if you wanted to dive into a little bit of the backstory and the real facts surrounding the Teamsters bus strike and the question of unionism here in Rhode Island, or if John Keith is perhaps your potential senator, it'll all be up there. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn, and nonsense-free. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. CoalitionRadio.us, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. If you're an independent candidate, if you're an established candidate, if you want to just have a chance to have a conversation about real issues, contact us in the coming weeks at coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. Anyone willing to go one-on-one and actually get away from the spin, away from the word tracks, away from the nonsense, and actually wants to get involved in really an exposition of where they're coming from as a leader here in the state, we welcome your contribution. Folks, we'll see you next Friday.